Chapter 736. Yanghua couldn't be considered to have a tiger's back or a bear's waist. His muscles didn't show off. Even if he took off his shirt, the angular muscles all over his body only looked good. Compared to a real muscle man, he was far from being a real muscle man. However, that was only based on the premise that he did not use his internal strength. If Poplar Fruit used his full strength, his muscles, which were hidden deep and even wrapped around his bones, would double in size. That would be quite a visual impact. However, it was not very useful to turn himself into a muscular man. Expanding his muscles did not mean that his strength would increase. There was a parabolic critical point. Exceeding this range would affect Poplar Fruit's strength. However, if Poplar Fruit only used a little bit of his internal strength, his muscles would show a perfect shape that was not inferior to that of a black athlete. His body shape would not become ugly. For example, Poplar Fruit's chest muscles were originally slightly bulging and flat. After the expansion of his internal strength, they could make all the girls scream. On the one hand, it was the shaping of his muscles. On the other hand, it was the soaring momentum. The murderous aura that he learned from Shionkahu was too bloody. Poplar Fruit only used the mind formula of Shingi boxing to simulate the ferocious momentum of the fierce tiger cavalry. Of course, this was also modified by Yanghua. The intent of the Xingyi martial arts was explosive in nature. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to scare off the enemy in such a short period of time and successfully attack. Yanghua had modified it into a continuous aura that could be used continuously. Although it was not suffocating, it was better to be able to last until Poplar Fruit finished the runway. As a result, when Ricardo and the others came in again, it just so happened that Yanghua was doing another runway show after several adjustments. Although his face was still as calm as before, the sharpness in his eyes, the strength in his muscles, and the opening and closing of the bloodthirsty wolf's head on his pants gave them an unprecedented shock. Perfect, perfect. Ricardo looked at Poplar Fruit with shining eyes, just like an ordinary man who saw a super sexy beauty. He could not help but shout in excitement. Ricardo! Giselle, who didn't know that Ricardo had already approved of Poplar Fruit, was so excited that she jumped up when she saw Ricardo appear again. Great! Ricardo saw Leon and the way I chose for him. Ricardo also said it was perfect. Giselle clenched her fists. Her messy thoughts couldn't hide her joy. She walked quickly toward Ricardo and the others. Poplar Fruit had originally planned to stop for a drink after walking back and forth. Unexpectedly, as soon as he turned around, he saw Giselle running to a handsome middle-aged man beside Ardil. If it wasn't Ricardo, Poplar Fruit might have thought that it was Giselle's boyfriend who came to visit, but Poplar Fruit still knew Ricardo. Before he came to Paris, he had spent some time learning about the background of the major brands in Bali Fashion Week. Givenchy's chief designer, Poplar Fruit, had introduced him. Why is he here? Poplar Fruit's reaction was a little slow, but he immediately thought of the reason. Is it because of me? I think so. What a great disturbance today. Because she was not familiar with him, Yanghua stood on the tea stage and hesitated whether she should go over to greet him. Giselle, you taught me well. Ricardo gave Giselle a big hug. Ricardo had hired Giselle. His original intention was to let Giselle, who had retired from modeling, come back to the industry and give some pressure and inspiration to some arrogant supermodels with her rich experience. Now it seemed that Giselle had done a good job under Poplar Fruit's guidance. Ardil had told him that Giselle and Barbara had made great contributions during this period of time. He thought that after the fashion week, he could consider putting them in an important position. After letting the flattered Giselle pass, Ricardo and Ardil walked to Poplar Fruit. Seeing this, Poplar Fruit hurriedly got off the stage and put on a jacket. Poplar Fruit knew that Ricardo was gay. Leon, this is Ricardo, our chief designer. Ardil introduced him to them. I know, Mr. Ricardo. Nice to meet you. Poplar Fruit shook hands with him. Ricardo was not tall, only about 1.7 meters. Poplar Fruit was easily a head taller than him. Nice to meet you, too. You're awesome. Ricardo laughed. You speak French very well, much better than me. Ardil secretly rolled her eyes and thought, how can you compare yourself to Leon? He speaks French more fluently than a native Frenchman. Actually, we can communicate in Italian, Poplar Fruit said in the same fluent Italian, if you find it difficult to speak French. Haha, Ardil said you were a translator, but I didn't believe it. Now I believe it. Ricardo muttered a few words in Italian, then switched back to French. Let's continue speaking French. There are some people here who don't understand Italian. After talking for a long time, under Ardil's interference, they finally returned to the main topic. Ricardo said to Yanghua seriously, you should know what's going on out there. Ardil told me that you're a good girl. It's just that those reports are misleading the public. I don't care about these things. I only care about pushing Givenchy forward, and anyone who stands in its way has to leave. Giselle's expression froze. She thought that Poplar Fruit had no chance. Poplar Fruit, on the other hand, felt that the master in front of him actually admired him, not the kind of admiration between men. So he patiently waited for Ricardo to continue. However, after watching your live performance and the video, I think you performed very well. Givenchy also hopes to have an excellent talent like you to join us, and then together we can bring Givenchy to glory. Ardil felt that Ricardo was a bit out of line. As he talked about the idea of binding Poplar Fruit. He coughed twice and said, Leon, Ricardo means that we will support you, and then we will make this Fashion Week show beautiful. Yes. Ricardo nodded and said, not only Ardil's design, but also my birds of paradise. Hearing this, Giselle looked at Ricardo in surprise. That would be a heavy burden. Including Ardil's collection, Poplar Fruit would have to show at least 10 or 20 sets of clothes in the main hall. Wouldn't it be tiring to walk for a whole day? Fortunately, Poplar Fruit was strong enough to withstand pressure. He nodded indifferently. Well, let's not talk about this now. There are still 2 days before the opening of Fashion Week. Before that, we have to respond to the public's opinion. Ricardo said seriously, Leon, I will arrange a press conference for you tomorrow morning. Are you confident that you can change people's opinion of you at the press conference? Chapter 737. Ricardo's plan was to have Poplar Fruit appear at the press conference to at least change the public's opinion of Givenchy. Then, the media that believed them and the media that continued to slander them would continue to argue. In the end, Poplar Fruit would appear at the Bali Fashion Week and shatter all the rumors. No matter how one looked at it, Givenchy's ending would be good. Even if the media that slandered them continued to wave their flags and shout their battle cries, they would just be creating hype for them. However, would things really go as smoothly as Ricardo thought? He didn't know that while he was whistling and leading a large group of people out of Ardil's residence, in the southern part of Bali, there was a press conference that disrupted his plans at the Shangri-La Hotel where Poplar Fruit used to live. Although he didn't know what it was about, he heard that the Princess of Monaco, one of the spokespersons for Gucci, was going to hold a press conference. Moreover, it was at the critical juncture of Bali Fashion Week. Many newspapers heard the news and came to support the press conference more than some movie stars. Is there something to announce? Is the princess going to change sides at the last minute? Why did she suddenly join another brand? Or is the princess in love again? Why did they say again? Because 2 months ago, the princess broke up with her lawyer boyfriend. The reporters in the audience were all speculating. They had been gathered in the room for half an hour. The door leading to the outside was closed, and a group of people filed in. Everyone was excited. The main character is here. Princess Charlotte rushed over as soon as she got off the plane. She didn't even take a break. In fact, she could have rested for an hour or two. With her status as a princess, no one would think it was too much. However, Princess Charlotte really didn't want to wait any longer. The deep sense of guilt in her heart drove her into the conference hall that was temporarily used as a press conference. She nodded to the host on the stage. After the host finished his introduction, she walked up and took the microphone. Thank you for coming. The weather is very hot, so I hope you can take care of your health. Princess Charlotte was famous for her elegance, and her good upbringing made her speech very pleasant to the ears. Hearing her opening remarks, the reporters below the stage laughed in a friendly manner. However, this time, Princess Charlotte didn't chat with the reporters for too long. She smiled and continued, today's press conference is mainly to clarify some matters and apologize to a friend. The reporters below the stage looked at each other. The face of the princess's ex-boyfriend appeared in their minds. Could it be that the princess wanted to apologize and beg for his forgiveness? This person is Mr. Poplar Fruit, the one that has been discussed in the newspapers and on the internet today. Princess Charlotte awkwardly said Poplar Fruit's name. He's the Chinese model from Givenchy. How could it be him? There was an uproar under the stage. They never thought that the princess would be involved with that rotten brat. He couldn't figure it out. Immediately, many reporters raised their hands. I'm sorry, I can't answer your questions right now. Princess Charlotte gently bowed and said, please listen to what I have to say. I will give you time to ask questions later. After calming down, Princess Charlotte slowly said, everyone may be wondering why I would apologize to him. That's because the information you've seen about him was leaked from my hands. Another uproar. Princess Charlotte didn't give them time to be surprised. She slightly raised her voice and said, yes, out of curiosity, I had someone check Poplar Fruit's information. But I didn't expect that a hacker would invade my bodyguard's iPad and leak the information. I'm very, very sorry for causing so much trouble for him. "Princess, you don't need to apologize to this kind of person," a reporter shouted. Princess Charlotte looked at him seriously and said, "I know that many reporters have the same thoughts as this reporter, but today, I want to clarify everyone's views on poplar fruit. I'm very disgusted by the hacker's behavior, and I'm also shocked by the media's out-of-context reporting." Princess Charlotte sighed and said, "There's a lot of information that you didn't report. You just grabbed some unorthodox information and fabricated facts to slander a person. I think that's wrong." Princess Charlotte might not have known that the information that Pai Din-1 leaked had actually been fabricated into poplar fruit's black material. The wool comes from the sheep's back. To a certain extent, those one-sided reports were mainly due to the framing of that information. According to the real information that I found through the official level, poplar fruit isn't the son of a senior executive. He's just an ordinary civilian. Even his parents are just farmers. Is she trying to clear poplar fruit's name? Reporters who say that he's a playboy, please pay attention. According to my information, he had a relationship that lasted 4 years. I think that a man who can persist for such a long time definitely isn't a playboy. Princess Charlotte smiled and said, "Besides, when I met him, he was very polite. It even made me doubt my own charm. How could such a man be a playboy? Besides, when I met him, he was with his daughter. Seeing how gentle and considerate he was to his daughter, I once missed the happy times when my father took me to the amusement park when I was young." Princess Charlotte smiled gently. "But, Your Highness, why would you investigate a man? From what you said, you two don't even know each other." A reporter couldn't help but ask. "I'll specially answer your question for you. There won't be a next time." Princess Charlotte elegantly raised an index finger and shook it, saying, "My meeting with him was a coincidence. However, his French and Italian are very good. So good that no one would believe that he's a foreigner." "Is it that exaggerated?" The reporters had a look of disbelief. "At that time, my bodyguard felt that there was a need to investigate his identity. You guys know, they were worried that there might be spies." Princess Charlotte smiled and said, "I was also curious, so I agreed. Later, I found out that he was a very good translator. Only then did I feel that everything made sense." This answer made everyone feel more comfortable. They were worried that he was a spy, so they did the investigation. If Her Highness was interested in a yellow man from Asia, then they would definitely be depressed. But here's the problem. Translator? Isn't he a model? Chapter 738. From the information that Pai Din-1 sent out, one could see the sinister intentions of the people behind it. The information that the media got was vague about poplar fruit's occupation, but they didn't care. After all, the breaking news was about poplar fruit's nationality and his ambiguous relationship with many women. Yes, he's a professional translator. Princess Charlotte saw the confused look of the reporters and took the initiative to explain, "Last year, Apple's Mr. Steve Jobs passed away. After his biography was published, I believe you all have read it. Poplar fruit was the translator who introduced this book to China. Without him, the Chinese people wouldn't be able to read this wonderful book." Princess Charlotte seriously introduced Yanggua's situation to the reporters below the stage. However, the reporters below the stage weren't interested in what she said at all. They were full of excitement in the audience, waiting for Princess Charlotte to finish so that they could ask the questions in their hearts. Finally, Princess Charlotte put down the microphone, and a host of the press conference came up and said, "Okay, now it's time for questions. The reporters that I call have a chance to ask a question." Bali Daily News. A reporter with his hand raised stood up happily. He didn't wait for the staff to pass the microphone to him and asked loudly, "Your Royal Highness, when did your relationship with Mr. Poplar Fruit start?" The media's questions were always so unscrupulous. Now that the royal family was just a symbol, the reporters would give Princess Charlotte some necessary respect, but in terms of hype, they would never become gentle knights just because she was a princess. Princess Charlotte frowned, raised the microphone, and said with some dissatisfaction, "I only know him. There's no relationship like you said." Next. The New France Daily News. The host quickly interrupted the reporter who wanted to continue asking, "Your Royal Highness, did you break up with your ex-boyfriend because of poplar fruit? Did the Monegasque royal family allow you to marry a commoner?" Although it was an indirect analysis, his question was actually the same as the previous reporter's question. Princess Charlotte and her ex-boyfriend some time ago, this matter was also an unspeakable pain in her heart. When the New France Daily News reporter brought it up, it was undoubtedly another kick to her wound that was almost healed. Princess Charlotte's face darkened, and her temper became stubborn. She didn't even pick up the microphone and turned to look at the host next to her. The host understood and smiled. Reporter friend, I said that each person can only ask one question. You're violating the rules. Okay, next. The New France Daily News reporter was a little unwilling, but he didn't dare to make a scene at the princess's press conference, so he could only sit down resentfully. However, there was a triumphant smile on his face. He had already thought of how to write this piece of news. Yes, a rookie a rookie model, suspected of cheating, breaking up with her ex-model. What? Princess Charlotte didn't mention it? But she didn't deny it either. That was a guilty conscience, and she chose to admit it. The next one was even more unprincipled. It was the infamous Sun newspaper in Europe. Many A-list celebrities and athletes hated it to the core. Of course, those small celebrities who weren't in the mainstream flocked to it, because the Sun scandals could increase their fame, and then they could take the opportunity to make money. However, even though the reporters of the Sun were very bad, their professionalism was unquestionable. A man stood up and proudly waited for the microphone to be brought over before he said, Princess Charlotte. From the beginning, it was faintly discernible how disdainful he was to the so-called royal family. If it wasn't for the boss behind him leaving some face for the other party, he would have directly called her by her name. Princess Charlotte, what do you think of this friend called Poplar Fruit? Good or bad? It was a very ordinary question. The reporters around him looked at him strangely and thought to themselves, is this the Sun? Why doesn't it seem like their style? Did they change bosses? The Sun's reporter sneered in his heart, Humph, you mortals, idiots, how would you understand the mystery of my question? Princess Charlotte didn't have a good impression of the Sun at first, so she was on her guard at first. However, she didn't expect the other party to throw out such a simple question, which stunned her. After thinking for a while, Princess Charlotte said, Yang is a good man. In French, nouns are masculine, so people usually refer to men and women. If there were Chinese netizens here, they would definitely slap the table and laugh, Poplar Fruit, you bastard, the princess gave you a good person card. However, it seemed that there was no such thing as a good person card in Europe and America. Princess Charlotte felt that she hadn't said enough, so she confirmed again and added, Poplar Fruit is indeed a good person, talented, capable, and considerate. I think he's better than most men in the world. Until Princess Charlotte finished speaking, she didn't know what kind of uproar her words would cause. In fact, it was the reporter from the New France Daily who provoked her and made her subconsciously compare Poplar Fruit with her predecessor. Talented, Princess Charlotte was referring to Poplar Fruit's language talent. Capable, she was referring to Poplar Fruit's powerful kung fu, who took down her bodyguard in a few moves. As for being considerate, of course, Poplar Fruit had never been considerate to her. That was because she saw Poplar Fruit and Kiki's father-daughter relationship. However, her sudden words made the reporters below the stage think. When Princess Charlotte compared Poplar Fruit with her predecessor, it was purely to compare the personalities and characteristics of both sides. She never had any romantic thoughts about Poplar Fruit in her heart. After all, the gap between the two was too big, and Poplar Fruit didn't meet her aesthetic standards. The reporter from the Sun proudly glanced at the other reporters who were in an uproar. He thought to himself, a bunch of idiots. Did you see that? This is the art of interviewing. Didn't we make her obediently reveal the juicy news we wanted? Although Princess Charlotte only came to her senses after hearing the reminder from the host who was wiping away cold sweat, she repeatedly denied it. However, the Sun's reporter had already taken the initiative to sit down. This isn't something you can deny just because you want to. Words are like spilled water, they can't be taken back. How you want to write it, isn't it all up to us? Hee hee. Chapter 739. After all, there was a huge cultural difference. It usually took 2 to 3 days for foreign news to reach the country. Therefore, even though Bali was in an uproar and there were many reposts in other countries in Europe, the news had not spread in China's semi-closed internet circle. On the other side of the Atlantic, the United States was the first to spread the news on major social networks, even though there was a time difference. Many people who liked to gossip but did not know much about the fashion industry also knew about the news. They spread it by word of mouth and reposted it casually. Somehow, the news reached the ears of 2 people. One was Poplar Fruit's old friend, Alan. Adam, one of the 3 giants of Blizzard, whom we affectionately called Alan, was in the company again today. He stayed up all night with a few colleagues in the game testing department. He did nothing else but nervously tested the game. In short, he played the game all night. Alan. Lying on the sofa in the studio, he was shaken awake by his colleague before he could sleep for 2 hours. Alan rubbed his red eyes, grabbed his messy hair, and looked at his colleague in confusion. Alan, isn't that Poplar Fruit your friend? His colleague asked him with a tablet. What poplar fruit? I don't know him. Alan shook his head and was about to fall back to sleep. No, isn't he the Mr. Leon who came last time and sold Hearthstone to us? Look at this picture. The last time poplar fruit came, Alan showed him around the studio and played games with his colleagues. This guy had a good memory and recognized him after browsing Twitter. When Leon was mentioned, Alan suddenly raised his head. Leon? What happened to him? I don't know, but it seems that a lot of people on the internet are scolding him. His colleague handed the tablet to Alan. Scolding him? Why? Alan was puzzled. He looked at the picture and laughed. It's Leon. He is quite handsome in these pictures. I remember he told me last time that he will go to Bali in September and then he will come over to play next month. If he is in Bali, then it must be Leon. Another gossipy colleague ran over with his computer. He poked the screen and explained the news to them with relish. Gossiping wasn't just a woman's talent. These coder nerds who never left the house also had a burning desire for gossip. The more he listened, the darker Alan's face became. He did not expect that his very strong brother would be slandered like this. Let's not talk about anything else. Just the news saying that Yanghua was a playboy and a dandy young master who didn't know anything. Alan didn't agree. Poplar fruit had been with him for a few days. At that time, Kiki was still young. Alan still felt that poplar fruit was an absolutely family-oriented father. Although poplar fruit was still single at that time, Alan could not see that poplar fruit had a bad habit of being a playboy. Poplar fruit was even less like a playboy. Poplar fruit was not a person who spent money extravagantly. Contrary to what the news said, poplar fruit was not a person who did not know anything. On the contrary, poplar fruit was very talented. If poplar fruit was willing, Alan wanted to pull poplar fruit to Blizzard. Whether it was designing games or simply doing translation work, he felt that poplar fruit was super awesome. No. I have to help him clarify it. Alan angrily took out his tablet and replied to the news tweet. Alan. His colleague said weakly, this is my Twitter, this account was a nobody. Even if he replied, it would be like a stone sinking into the sea. It was silent. Alan searched for a long time and found the phone he had thrown under the sofa. He opened the Twitter that he had not used for a long time. Alan was a very low-key person. Although his Twitter account had been opened very early, and his identity had been verified. He also had tens of millions of fans urging Blizzard to update the game. However, the number of tweets Alan had posted could be counted on two hands. He was so angry that he took the American CNN Twitter account and reposted the news. One tweet was not enough to express his anger. Alan posted 10 tweets in a row. The first 2 tweets were about his anger and confusion. The next 7 tweets were about his understanding of poplar fruit and his character. The last tweet, Alan wrote, Leon, in the previous tweet, he had explained poplar fruit's English name, is not as useless as you say. Leon sold us a very, very good game he designed last year, which is the Hearthstone we are going to release this year. The Legend of Warcraft Heroes. Yes, I believe that the players who have participated in our closed beta will know of his talent and contribution to us. Of the 10 tweets, Alan posted one after another. Therefore, even though he wrote very quickly, it took him more than 20 minutes to finish posting. The first 9 tweets had attracted the attention of many Blizzard fans. Most of them did not know the ins and outs of this matter. Just when they were wondering why Alan was so agitated, they could not remain calm when they saw the last tweet. Fuck. Hearthstone was designed by this Chinese person? Their first reaction was whether or not Alan's account had been hacked. Although Hearthstone had not been officially released, some screenshots of the closed beta were leaked. There were also many rumors spreading. All the Blizzard fans were already familiar with it and were looking forward to it. No matter who designed this game, they knew that this game was very good. Then, not long after, Blizzard's CEO Mike and Blizzard's official Twitter account also reposted Alan's tweet. They were doing their best to support their good friend Poplar Fruit. Especially Mike, he also revealed that Poplar Fruit had once made very constructive suggestions for the Heroes of the Storm game. Well, of course, he also succeeded in making Blizzard jump the ticket again. Mike mocked, yes, they jumped the ticket, but you should be happy that you can play a more perfect game in the future. Okay. After the news was confirmed, more than 30 million Blizzard fans reposted their tweets. The storm of public opinion brought about by Poplar Fruit was completely divided into 2 opposing camps. Alan and Blizzard's support for Poplar Fruit was not to take advantage of the opportunity to create hype. On the contrary, there was one person who did not think so. Recently, the great director Leon had been running around with a copy of his movie. Although with his reputation, he did not have to worry about the scheduling problem, Leon still hoped to get more theater support. He had a faint feeling that this movie would be another peak for him after Brokeback Mountain. When he saw the familiar face of Poplar Fruit in the news, he was stunned. After checking it out, Leon laughed heartlessly. He did not care whether Poplar Fruit was a good model or not. Leon found a good opportunity to create hype. He stood up decisively and supported Poplar Fruit in front of the media, saying that he was very talented. Yang? Martel's translation of The Young School was excellent. I believe that his translation, like my movie, can open the hearts of the audience. I'm sure you'll enjoy this magical journey. Leon was indeed strongly supporting Poplar Fruit, but more often, he would take out his movie to promote it. Not to mention his intentions, Poplar Fruit had people in North America who knew and supported him, which was also unknown to the European media. Now, with Princess Charlotte's press conference, Bali was going to be lively again. Chapter 740. In mainland China, WeChat, which was launched last year, was still on the rise. Weibo still occupied the majority of social media. All the major streamers were stirring up trouble on Weibo. Many of the topics people talked about after dinner came from Weibo. Fang Beibei, who had already flown to Los Angeles to participate in the modeling competition, did not know that a scandal centered around her had quietly emerged. Qin Shueishue's Weibo was famous for posting pictures of Guangdong province's cuisine and anecdotes of strange people. His fans did not stop at Guangdong province. Some backpackers in major provinces in the country who liked to travel also followed his Weibo. Today, everyone saw that Qin Shueishue did not post his insights on food in Yangcheng as usual. Instead, he posted an emotional Weibo from the perspective of a bystander. The way we showed off our love in the past was so weak. Look at this golden boy and jade girl. It was reported that they were both students of Higashiyama University School of Mathematics and Engineering. They would be working together on the stage of the International Mathematical Modeling Competition. The boy's confession was too heartwarming. This time, the happiest thing was not getting a brand or ranking, but having the opportunity to stand side by side with you on the podium to receive the blessings of children from different countries. The picture below the Weibo post was a photo that Wang Di secretly took with Fang Beibei in the cafeteria. It had to be said that Wang Di was still a little handsome, and he usually paid more attention to dressing up. He really looked a little like a young man. Fang Beibei was even more so. She was a natural beauty with no blind spots. Although she did not wear any makeup, the moment she turned her head, she also captured the hearts of countless otakus. Had Wang Di ever posted such a mushy Weibo and said such things? The answer was no. Although Wang Di was very active in chasing Fang Beibei, he did not dare to go too far. You can't possibly decide on this matter when the other party isn't your girlfriend yet, right? Besides, after Poplar Fruit appeared, Wang Di, who saw the huge gap, also gave up. He completely lost the desire to stir up trouble, and it was even more impossible for him to say such things. Qin Shueishue did not care about these things. His hype was always 30% true and 70% fabricated. Not only did he fabricate this fact, but he also used the photo editing tool to Photoshop Wang Di's fake Weibo screenshot to make others believe it. He wasn't afraid of being investigated. If others said that he was fabricating, he could say that Wang Di had deleted this Weibo post. As for their investigation, they will find out that Higashiyama University does have these two people, and they really went to the US to participate in the competition. Qin Shueishue's Weibo immediately tickled the fans. When they saw this Weibo and then looked at the delicate, refined, and cute Fang Beibei, they couldn't help but click on the repost button. There were also a lot of people who knew the students of Higashiyama University. They didn't forget to at them when they forwarded the post. This time, Weibo spread out from a circle. Every student of a key university would have an inexplicable sense of collective honor in their hearts. Higashiyama University was no exception. When they saw that their classmates were being watched by tens of thousands of people and were called the most beautiful straight-A student, straight-A goddess, straight-A sister, and straight-A couple, they could not help but proudly repost it. While they were still chatting with their friends outside the school, they said to each other with pride, "Look, this is our school. Shuemu University has Sister Milk Tea, Wu University has Cherry Blossom Goddess, and we also have a straight-A student sister." Many people started to show off. When the news spread to the School of Mathematics, the reactions from all sides were different. The angriest ones were Lin Xingshan and a few of Fang Beibei's roommates. Others might not know, but how could they not know? Who posted on Weibo? How can you spout nonsense? Lin Xingshan said angrily. At this time, the internet was no longer just reposting Qin Shueishue's Weibo. Many well-known bloggers shamelessly reposted Qin Shueishue's Weibo. Their reposts even deleted the watermark and did not indicate the source. They directly copied and pasted it unchanged and published it themselves. It was as if they were the ones who discovered this news. Lin Xingshan could not take it anymore. She replied on Weibo that Fang Beibei and Wang Di were not a couple and so on. However, the words of a lowly person carried little weight. Her reply was only like throwing a small stone into the sea. It did not splash at all. Lin Xingshan also found her roommates and Poplar Fruit's friends from the multidimensional teaching club to clear Fang Beibei's name. However, this only had a small impact on a small scale. More people were influenced by public opinion. 3 people became a tiger, and they gradually believed in the existence of this straight-A couple. There were also many people who did not know the truth but knew Wang Di or Fang Beibei, who confirmed the rumors on Weibo to the outside world. After Qin Shui threw a big bomb, she hid behind the computer screen and did not say a word. She chuckled and watched the fire from the other side of the river. In just one morning, his Weibo had been reposted more than 30,000 times. In the afternoon, the keyword straight-A couple had also been read more than 6 million times. It had become a hot topic on Weibo in one fell swoop. Seeing the few replies below his Weibo that were different from the mainstream, it seemed that they wanted him to change the rhetoric on Weibo and say that the two of them were not a couple at all. A mantis trying to stop a chariot. Qin Shui proudly lit a cigarette and thought, "This little bit of hype is too simple." Qin Shui thought as she puffed out smoke. "It doesn't show my strength at all. But this money is quite easy to earn. Haha, the young master of the Li family is rich and overbearing. He gives a lot of money and the work is easy. I'm willing to do it twice more. Haha." Qin Shui swiped open her phone screen and saw the satisfactory reply from the other party on WeChat. She was so happy that she laughed out loud. With such a big storm happening in the country, Poplar Fruit and Fang Beibei were still in the dark. Other people didn't know about their relationship. Those who knew about their relationship didn't think of informing them. Song Jiwen had been very busy recently. He was pulled by Chen Anlin. Whenever the two of them were free, they would go to the building materials and home furnishings market. They were busy renovating the place they had rented and preparing Chen Anlin's new martial arts dojo in full swing. He didn't know that Poplar Fruit's girlfriend had been inexplicably assigned to another man on the internet. The news that Poplar Fruit had caused abroad had not entered the country for the time being. After all, Poplar Fruit's scandal was a scandal. Moreover, Zheng Yujie had also been implicated. Although some people in the fashion industry knew about it, it was forcefully suppressed by the higher-ups. There were even some keywords that were blocked on the internet. This was not the first time the country had dealt with such matters. The foreign media had often slandered the domestic leaders and their families. Of course, the matter was getting bigger and bigger. There were even tens of millions of gamers in the United States who supported Poplar Fruit. They would definitely not be able to suppress this news. It could only be that the country was still relatively calm at the moment. The storm of public opinion was only brewing. It felt like a storm was coming. Chapter 741. All of you, stand properly. Listen to my command. Punch with your left hand and cross your right leg. Early in the morning, in the villa's artificial garden, Poplar Fruit, Kiki, and Luo Danny were practicing Benben boxing together. Luo Danny was attracted by Kiki, so she woke up very early to see this set of boxing with a very interesting name. "Uncle Leon, is this Chinese Kung Fu?" Luo Danny asked while panting. Although she was several times older than Kiki, Luo Danny's physical strength was not as good as Kiki's. Although Kiki could not stand and fell to the ground, the little girl's laughter was still full of energy, like a yellow bird that would not be tired. "You can say that. I created it based on Chinese Kung Fu. It's just for Kiki to exercise." Poplar Fruit laughed. "Wow, it's still so amazing." Luo Danny said. "Then Uncle Leon, can you show us Chinese Kung Fu?" She quietly pulled Kiki to stand beside her and looked up at Poplar Fruit. In fact, Luo Danny was tired, but she was too embarrassed to say that she was tired, so she found an excuse to stand aside and take a breath. "Papa, let's do boxing." Kiki made a cloud hand gesture and jumped around excitedly. In terms of loyalty, Kiki was Daddy's biggest fan. "What should I do?" Poplar Fruit scratched his head. The Miao Dao did not have any equipment, and it was too fierce. The strength of Xingyi boxing was in the concept and the use of strength, so it was not suitable for performance. Tai Chi was fine, but if he was slow, he was afraid that Luo Danny would not like it. Then he would perform the fast Tai Chi anyway, he usually practiced it a lot. Then he would add the 8 steps meteor kick, which was recently figured out by Poplar Fruit. A set of punches took 2 minutes, which was actually quite fast. Moreover, with Poplar Fruit's graceful movements and the long robe with wide sleeves of the ancient Chinese scholar, he would really be able to dance like a nimble butterfly. "Uncle Leon is so awesome. Luo Dani clapped her hands hard. This time, she was really surprised and impressed. Luo Dani was still holding a female self-defense sword with the Imperial Swordmaster in front of her. However, Luo Dani now felt that the others were too weak compared to Uncle Poplar Fruit. For the 8-year-old Luo Dani, her evaluation was not completely fair. Girls liked beautiful things. She thought that Poplar Fruit was more powerful because of the beauty of Poplar Fruit's martial arts. As for how powerful Poplar Fruit was, Luo Dani certainly did not know. Hearing this, Kiki happily ran to Sister Luo Dani, stood on her tiptoes and straightened her chest. She proudly said, "My papa is the best. Mr. Leon." Poplar Fruit was looking at the two lovely children with a smile when he heard the footsteps behind him. He turned around and saw the housekeeper coming over. The housekeeper lowered his head and said to him, "Mr. Ardil wants to see you." There was a press conference today, so there was no practice in the morning. Poplar Fruit still remembered this. He guessed that Ardil wanted to talk to him about this. Nodding, Poplar Fruit turned to Kiki and said, "Kiki, Dad has to go to work. You can play for a while. Remember to have breakfast with Sister Luo Dani later." Poplar Fruit now spoke French to Kiki as much as possible. Kiki had learned it very well. As long as Poplar Fruit did not speak too profound words and did not speak as fast as the news broadcast on French TV, Kiki could still understand. I know. Kiki waved her little hands and said goodbye to her father. She did not feel reluctant at all. "Please, Mr. Housekeeper," Poplar Fruit said politely. He knew that the housekeeper would not accompany Kiki. At most, he would send a nanny to take care of them. When they arrived at the study, Ardil was sitting there, smoking a cigar. However, there was no gloomy atmosphere. Instead, he was full of smiles. "Leon, do you want one?" Ardil took out a whole box of his treasured Cuban Cohiba cigars and put them on the table. Poplar Fruit waved his hand. He turned and opened the window to let the smoke in the room dissipate a little. Then he said, "No, I don't smoke. And Ardil, you have to be careful. You are old. Smoking less is good for your health." Ardil laughed and said, "Leon, you don't know how to enjoy life. Our life? Forget it, let's not talk about it." Ardil remembered his original intention of asking Poplar Fruit to come here. He looked at Poplar Fruit strangely, which made Poplar Fruit feel a little scared. Then he asked, "Leon, do you know Princess Charlotte?" "Princess Charlotte?" Poplar Fruit searched for the word in his mind and finally found that he had seen it before. "Well, how should I put it? Not really, but I do know that there is such a princess." Ardil rolled his eyes and said, "Of course there is. If there is no such thing, do you think I would fool you?" "Well, I know. She is the Princess of Monaco." Poplar Fruit smiled and recited the report in his memory. "I didn't ask you that." Ardil was speechless. He threw the newspaper in front of him to Poplar Fruit. "You really don't know Princess Charlotte? If you don't know her, why would she defend you?" Poplar Fruit picked up the newspaper and saw the headline, "Princess of Monaco confesses her love to China's rookie model." "Rookie again? You are a rookie. Your whole family are rookies." Poplar Fruit was a little indignant. However, what's with this remote love confession? Looking at the report, there was a photo of Princess Charlotte sitting on the stage with a smile. Poplar Fruit was surprised to find that he did know this woman. Wasn't she the woman he had met 3 times and had a conflict with her bodyguard? Poplar Fruit thought for a moment and suddenly remembered that her bodyguard did call her princess. So it was really a princess. He didn't hear it wrong. "Do you know her?" Ardil asked curiously. "We met several times." Poplar Fruit nodded and explained, "She also lives in Shangri-La. We met before, but we didn't talk to each other." Poplar Fruit felt that it was a bit ridiculous. The two of them had never talked to each other. It couldn't be love at first sight, right? Poplar Fruit didn't think he had such great charm. In the report, Princess Charlotte took the blame for the information leak and sincerely apologized. Poplar Fruit shook his head and didn't feel angry. Ardil took the opportunity to tease Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit waved his hand and said, "Don't talk nonsense. You know how unreliable these newspapers are. Besides, I have a girlfriend. Don't ruin the reputation of the princess." "Well, today's press conference will go on as scheduled, but you should really thank Princess Charlotte," Ardil said with a smile. "With her explanation in advance, you will feel a lot less pressure." Poplar Fruit nodded and didn't say anything. Ardil meant that he should feel lucky that the princess had risked her royal dignity to explain for him. However, Poplar Fruit lived in a society where the royal power was trampled underfoot. In his heart, there was no distinction between nobility and lowliness. Since Princess Charlotte had made a mistake, it was only right for her to come out and clarify it. This misunderstanding seemed to be gradually becoming a fact that most people recognized. Chapter 742. While Victor and Matisse were doing their hair and makeup, Poplar Fruit was bored, so he dialed Zheng Yujia's phone number. Last night, Poplar Fruit didn't apologize to Zheng Yujia in time. Today, he thought of it. Even if Poplar Fruit had the speaker turned on, he had to say it out loud. Of course, in this villa, Poplar Fruit believed that other than Kiki, no one else could understand Chinese. However, to Poplar Fruit's surprise, Zheng Yujia didn't care about it at all. What's there to apologize for? You didn't do anything wrong. Aya, what's the big deal? Do you need to make an international long-distance call? Listening to her voice, Zheng Yujia was still the invincible queen, as if this matter didn't affect her at all. I'm worried about affecting your father. Poplar Fruit said, isn't your father being promoted? Okay, you. Always worrying about things that you shouldn't worry about. These few days, I didn't see you caring about me at all. You only care about my father when you call. Do you really want to be our son-in-law? Zheng Yujia asked with a smile. This time, Poplar Fruit choked. He was silent for a while, resisting the urge to scratch his head, and complained, when did I not care about you? Did I take the initiative to call you? Also, as a girl, why are you so careless? Are these words coming out of your mouth? With such a carefree personality, let's see how you can get married in the future. These words sounded like they were quarreling to others, but in fact, they weren't. Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujia's relationship was very good, so good that they could joke about it casually. In the past, Poplar Fruit often complained about her like this, but most of the time, he was in a state of being suppressed. If I can't get married, don't I still have you? Don't you want me anymore? Zheng Yujia pretended to sound sweet, but Poplar Fruit knew how she felt about him. The feeling of being wronged in the latter half of her sentence went straight to Poplar Fruit's heart, making him feel very uncomfortable. He was a little unsure whether Zheng Yujia was really pretending or taking the opportunity to act out. After the commotion, Zheng Yujia told Poplar Fruit, don't worry, we're not made of paper. We're not like the foreign media who can say whatever they want. Don't forget, we have the world's best screen wall. There hasn't been any news on the domestic internet yet. After a pause, Zheng Yujia swallowed the words she was about to say. After Fang Beibei's scandal was posted on Weibo, Zheng Yujia had already seen it. Although she usually didn't want Poplar Fruit to mention Fang Beibei, how could she not know about her biggest rival? However, she still didn't want to tell Poplar Fruit. Maybe she was a little selfish, but it was understandable. Now, Poplar Fruit's makeup was no longer troublesome. Matisse had the template designed before, and with his skills, he was familiar with the process. Within 15 minutes, Poplar Fruit's makeup was done. Then, the group got into Ardil's Rolls-Royce and went to a nearby hotel, where Givenchy had selected the venue for the press conference. At first, Poplar Fruit didn't want to let Kiki go with him, but in the end, he couldn't stand the little girl's pestering. Besides, Ardil also joked that Kiki and Luo Danny should go with him. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to bring the two girls, who were always together, along. Pay attention at the press conference later. Don't fall into the reporter's trap. Ardil carefully reminded Poplar Fruit in the car. I told you yesterday what you should and shouldn't answer. You should remember it, right? Poplar Fruit nodded. That's good. At the press conference, pay attention to the host's instructions. He will help you control the situation. If you meet a difficult guy, just ignore him. We will also help you say a few words, Ardil said. In order to avoid suspicion, Ardil didn't say much according to the arrangement. The main representative of Givenchy was still the chief designer, Ricardo. However, Ardil still didn't feel at ease. He kept talking until the press conference started. Hearing that Poplar Fruit, who had been hiding for a long time, was going to make an official appearance, all the newspapers in Bali that were paying attention to and hyping up the news came to the venue early. Most of the people gathered at the entrance of the hotel, waiting for Poplar Fruit to get the first-hand news as soon as he got out of the car. Through the window of the Rolls-Royce, Poplar Fruit saw the dense crowd of Ma and two TV vans parked there. He was stunned and asked, Ardil, why is it so big? Even the TV stations are here? Poplar Fruit recognized the logos of TV1 and France Internationale. TV1 was the TV station with the highest ratings in France. It had a high status, just like CCXV in China. But why did they come to join in the fun? Ardil looked over and snorted. He explained to Poplar Fruit, see? That's TV1. It's private. They like to use this kind of gossip to attract viewers. And that one, it's an international TV station. They probably feel uncomfortable if they don't report on you because you're a foreigner. Don't worry about them. Let's go straight to the venue, Ardil said. At this time, many reporters recognized his car. 1, 2, 3. More and more people gathered around. Although there were many reporters who were worried about being lured away from the hotel, the number of reporters that surrounded the Rolls-Royce was enough to block it from the outside. After waiting for a while, 5 or 6 strong security guards came over and forced a narrow space in front of the car door. They had done their best. At this time, there was no need to say things like if he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have let Kiki and Luo Danny come. Poplar Fruit held Kiki in one hand and Luo Danny in the other. My daughters weren't heavy, so he carried them in his arms as if they were light. Then, he got out of the car. Poplar Fruit. A sharp-eyed person shouted. What an awkward pronunciation, but it was enough to provoke all the reporters who had already been unable to hold back. What do you think of the princess's confession? Questions and microphones flooded in. Poplar Fruit let the 2 girls squeeze their heads into his arms, fearing that they would be knocked on the head accidentally. Let's go. Poplar Fruit felt that the security guards around him were like willow branches in the wind, twisting and turning under the impact of the crowd. It seemed that they couldn't hold on any longer. Ardil also hurried out of the car. Under the protection of the security guards, the 2 squeezed into the hotel with difficulty and then fled. These reporters were too crazy. If it weren't for the security guards desperately guarding the door, they would have chased after them. Are you scared? Luo Danny asked curiously when she saw Kiki sitting in her father's arms and waving her little hands happily. No, I'm not scared. Papa is very powerful. Kiki said with a smile. Just now, Kiki sat high up and ran so fast. The little girl liked the pleasure of speed. Poplar Fruit rubbed Kiki's head grumpily and said, You're really bold. Just now, I told you to lower your head. What if someone knocked on your head? Chapter 743. After touching up his makeup backstage, Poplar Fruit and Ricardo entered the conference hall for the press conference first, followed by Ardil. At this time, the reporters had been led to the conference hall. They were getting impatient from waiting. Yangguo wasn't Princess Charlotte. She wasn't a famous person. The reporters didn't have that much patience. After waiting for a while, they started making a ruckus. They were complaining about why the show hadn't started yet. As soon as Poplar Fruit appeared, the conference hall was immediately filled with flashes. Even someone as strong as Poplar Fruit had to raise a hand to cover his eyes. Ricardo, who was behind him, also took up a lot of space on the camera's memory card. Ricardo's appearance was something they had never expected. They had always thought that Poplar Fruit was Ardil's personal action to get rid of Givenchy, and that was the truth. However, Ricardo's appearance had dispelled this rumor. They looked at each other and felt that something was not right. Have we been tricked by these old foxes? It was not unprecedented. In the past, some small brands deliberately designed all kinds of internal strife, palace intrigue to attract people's attention. The more the media paid attention to them, the happier they were. In the end, they found out that nothing had actually happened. All of this was a good show that they had written, directed, and acted out themselves. Everyone had helped them to create hype for nothing. However, with Givenchy's pride, did he really need to resort to such despicable means? Weren't they afraid that if they were not careful, they would really get themselves into trouble, and then their reputation would be ruined? When everyone was present, Ricardo signaled the host to start. The host made a long-winded introduction, then pushed Poplar Fruit out. This caught Poplar Fruit off guard. Wasn't he just going to answer a question? In fact, the host did not deliberately arrange this. The host did not have much official information about Poplar Fruit in his hands. He did not even have as much information as the reporters in the audience. After a while, the host realized that the people in the audience were getting impatient. He glanced at Ricardo, wanting him to say a few words. However, Ricardo calmly pointed at Poplar Fruit. Thus, Poplar Fruit put on his armor and went into battle. Yes. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit had the experience of giving speeches in front of many people, so he did not have stage fright. He picked up the microphone, stood on the rostrum, and tested his voice. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, Hello, everyone. I am Poplar Fruit. If you think it's a bit hard to pronounce, you can just call me Leon. Why did you let him go? Ardil lowered his head and asked Ricardo anxiously. He's not prepared at all. Ricardo rolled his eyes and said, Are you kidding me? Not preparing a speech for a press conference? And you're only telling me this now? Then what should we do? I just asked him to say a few words. Ardil said worriedly. The more he talks, the more mistakes he makes. What can we do? They could only continue and see his performance. I believe that he is a very smart person. Ricardo looked at Poplar Fruit. For some reason, Ricardo felt at ease from his calm expression. Everyone, please be quiet. Poplar Fruit raised his hands and pressed them flat. His voice was not loud, but it was very clear. I know you all have a lot of questions, so please be patient and listen to me for a few words. Then, in the following question and answer session, I will try my best to answer your questions, okay? Poplar Fruit's French was really standard, no different from the locals. Moreover, the words he used were more popular, unlike some rigid French scholars who like to use some classical words that had been put into coffins. This made the large number of French reporters in the audience feel very comfortable. Unconsciously, they quieted down after hearing Poplar Fruit's words. A large number of people? Yes. There were also some fashion and entertainment reporters from all over the world in the audience. After all, the Bali Fashion Week was a world-class event. In the next week or so, a large number of celebrities and stars from all over the world would come to Bali naturally. The reporters from all over the world who came to follow the news would not miss it. There were black people, hairy Russian men, and even Poplar Fruit saw a few Asian faces, but he did not know if they were reporters from China. Although you all have my information, it is not complete and not true. So, let me introduce myself first. Poplar Fruit said in a gentle voice. Although he did not show his sharpness, his neither servile nor overbearing, and his own unique temperament gradually showed. I'm from China. You all know that. I was not born in a red family. My parents are just a simple farmer couple. Perhaps you have heard Princess Charlotte mention it. Poplar Fruit said, however, you may not know that I actually have a lovely daughter. Her mother has passed away. Now, I also have a girlfriend that I like. She is just an ordinary classmate in my school. I love her, she loves me, I love my daughter, she loves my daughter, and my daughter loves her too. Poplar Fruit raised the corner of his mouth into a happy smile. My emotional state is so simple. It is not as complicated as you think. If you insist on using the photos to talk about things, I can only tell you that it is not what you think. They are just my friends and colleagues. This is just your side of the story. Many people in the audience were immersed in the sweet and happy atmosphere created by Poplar Fruit's gentle words, but there were still people who stubbornly believed that Poplar Fruit was lying and shouted out in dissatisfaction. Notice that he is speaking in Spanish. Perhaps it was because of the anger in his heart, he forgot to speak French for a moment. Instead, he shouted out his mother tongue. There were still many people present who could understand his words. After all, Spanish was more popular in Western countries. Such an abrupt sentence instantly made him the center of attention of everyone present. Indeed, Poplar Fruit was silent for a moment, then calmly responded in Spanish. It is normal that you don't believe what I said. However, the information you got, isn't it the one-sided statement of the person who provided it to you? And what I said, I can guarantee that every word is true. If you want, you can go ahead and investigate. He was also fluent in Spanish, even better than the reporter who had been in France for a long time and could not speak Spanish fluently. Many people understood what Poplar Fruit said, which made them give Poplar Fruit a thumbs up in their minds. It seems that the princess said that he is a translator? Someone in the audience murmured. He speaks French and Spanish very well. Could he be a spy trained by Red China? He even went to contact Princess Charlotte. I have to ask him later. Chapter 744. That's not a good habit. Ardil whispered to Ricardo. He wrote a small note and asked the host to secretly pass it to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit glanced at the note. It said, answer their questions later. He immediately understood. Poplar Fruit briefly introduced himself and returned the microphone to the host. Ricardo also stood up to say a few words. His words were full of affirmation for Poplar Fruit and expressed Givenchy's firm intention to hire Poplar Fruit. Seeing that the reporters below the stage couldn't sit still and repeatedly raised their hands to ask questions, Ricardo smiled and waved his hand to let the host arrange the next segment. Givenchy was so big that it naturally had several close media outlets as its mouthpieces. In order to prevent the press conference from immediately falling into a war of words, the host naturally called out one of his own media outlets first. Mr. Ricardo, may I ask if Givenchy hired Mr. Leon to open up the Eastern market? This was a very mild question. Ricardo took the microphone and said without hesitation, we have always attached great importance to the Eastern market, and there is no problem with hiring Mr. Leon just to open up the Eastern market. As you know, every year, our model team includes all kinds of excellent models with different skin colors from all over the world. These are all selected based on merit. We don't discriminate against people with different skin colors. Ricardo said gracefully. As soon as he finished speaking, many reporters of color applauded. Poplar Fruit could tell that Ricardo was actually sophistry. The question was directed at Poplar Fruit, but Ricardo's answer was focused on skin color. I learned something new. Poplar Fruit thought to himself. Next. Mr. Ardil, according to our information, you know Mr. Leon, but Leon's ability is far from meeting the requirements of Givenchy and our Bali Fashion Week. Why did you still choose him? Is this favoritism? A reporter stood up and asked loudly. There was finally a trace of disharmony in the press conference. Ardil's expression didn't change. He calmly and confidently stood up with the microphone and said, Leon is my friend. But I invited him to Bali not because he's my friend. On the contrary, Ardil said loudly, Leon gave me a lot of inspiration for the clothes I'm going to launch this year. I can tell you that Leon is the perfect person to wear these clothes. The reporters were in an uproar. They were shocked by Ardil's statement. Since when did our top designers need other people's inspiration? Moreover, it was an unknown Chinese person. Sir, are you saying that Leon is involved in the design of your clothes? Is he also a designer? The reporter couldn't help asking. This is the second and third question. The host reminded him with a smile. Ardil didn't care. He said seriously, I can answer your question. Leon didn't participate in the design. The inspiration I'm talking about is Leon's unique temperament, which awakened the long-dormant source of inspiration in my mind. The French were famous for their romance. Even French was known as the most romantic language in the world. But in fact, French wasn't romantic. The romantic ones were some traditional scholars, who liked to use some literary poems to speak. Ardil's education was of course classical and academic. Sometimes, what he said made people feel like he was composing poems. The next reporter stood up and pointed the finger at Ardil again. Mr. Ardil, even if Mr. Leon gave you the inspiration to design the new clothes, you shouldn't have invited him to be your model. Leon is a translator. He said it himself. We also know how clumsy he was when he walked on the runway. You invited a rookie model. Isn't that an insult to our sacred fashion capital? Yes. The reporters below the stage who had been convinced by Ardil suddenly realized something. They looked at their colleague with admiration, who had grasped the key point of the question. Ardil couldn't bear too much fire alone. The well-prepared host took the microphone and said with a smile, I can answer this question on behalf of Mr. Ardil. It was true that Leon was not familiar with the modeling industry in the past, but people learned and improved. I can guarantee that Leon is now fully qualified for the main stage of Givenchy. The main stage? The reporters below the stage looked at him as if he was a monkey. They thought to themselves, are you fucking kidding me? A rookie model half a month ago had improved so much that he could compete for the main stage now? They wouldn't believe it even if they were beaten to death. The host seemed to know what they were thinking. He laughed and said, well, I know you don't believe it. Please wait a moment. I'll show you a video. A video? The reporters watched in confusion as a staff member turned on the large LCD screen TV in the venue. Poplar Fruit was also puzzled. He saw Ardil sitting calmly on the stage, so he had to watch the video as well. The so-called video was, of course, the ones taken by Matisse and the ones recorded in Ardil's house. Ricardo had taken them back yesterday and had them roughly edited into a video. Perhaps it was the producer's bad taste, but the video actually included the exaggerated and flamboyant performance of Matisse and Victor in the opening of the video. After the beginning, the video clips of Poplar Fruit's first few days were shown. At that time, he was still in the Givenchy Club. Accompanied by the soft piano sound, the video began to unfold. Because of the limited time, the producer had only roughly selected a show d'oeuvre in the middle of each day's video. There were no dazzling interludes, flashbacks, or all kinds of special effects. The video was simple and clear at a glance. Sweat. Poplar Fruit looked at his clumsy movements at the beginning of the video. A big drop of sweat dripped from his forehead. He didn't expect to see himself in such a funny and embarrassing way from another angle. Rubbish. Someone cursed in a low voice. Poplar Fruit's ears were sharp, so he heard it in a low voice. He felt a little uncomfortable. In fact, many people thought so. The reporters in the room were basically dealing with the fashion industry. They could see the huge gap between Poplar Fruit and a real model. Watching the video, their eyes were full of disdain. However, no one interrupted the video. Since Givenchy had dared to show it to them, they should know what was going on. They couldn't do themselves in, right? Chapter 745. When the screen moved from the second day to the third and fourth day, most of the knowledgeable reporters began to change their expressions. Was this progress? They were a little confused. They just faintly felt that everything they saw was a little unrealistic. Could anyone make such great progress in just a few days? Watching this video was like watching a newborn baby learning how to walk, but the next day, he was able to let go of the adult's hand and walk unsteadily by himself, leaning against the wall. On the third day, he was able to stagger forward on his own. On the fourth day, he could run happily with small steps. As for the last part, everyone was a little numb because of the shock. They seemed to have seen a goshawk spreading its wings and flying. That's right. The rhythm of the music was more exciting, and Poplar Fruit walked on the runway with steady confidence. His straight back, handsome face, and unique temperament was different from any model they had ever seen. Although they couldn't feel it in the video, they could still see the changes in Poplar Fruit. Watching this video of less than 5 minutes, everyone faintly felt a little numb. Even a reporter who was crazy about fashion shows couldn't help but shed tears. Miracle. They remembered the 2 words that the 2 clowns had said at the beginning. At that time, they had thought that the 2 clowns were stupid. But now, it seemed that only a miracle could describe the phenomenal impact of Poplar Fruit. After the video, many people sat quietly with their mouths open. No one knew what to say. But he hasn't completely reached perfection. Someone couldn't help but whisper, although the progress is good, he hasn't reached the level of the main stage yet. In the end, he's still trash. Although this guy was clearly criticizing Poplar Fruit, the reporters sitting next to him nodded in agreement. At the end of the video, Poplar Fruit was indeed a little bit lacking. So, immediately, a reporter raised his hand and asked, "Is this video real?" It's hard to imagine that he has made such great progress in one day. "It's real," the host said with a smile. The host said wittily with a smile, "For this video, we have taken a video of Mr. Leon's model training from early September to last weekend. You have to pay attention. In the past 5 days, our Leon has been working hard to train." "Why didn't you add it to the video?" a reporter asked. There were still 5 days left. It was like a cake being baked in an oven. Everyone watched as it slowly took shape from a lump of batter. When it was about to be baked into a fragrant and exquisite pastry, the oven stopped abruptly, leaving behind a half-formed cake that was not yet cooked. It was really a maddening feeling. The host smiled and said, "Firstly, because the time of the video is limited, we don't want it to take up too much time. Secondly, we always have to leave some suspense. Everyone can see how gorgeous our Leon will be on the main stage the day after tomorrow." The host's smile was really annoying. The reporters under the stage gritted their teeth. How were they going to report this half-covered story? Could they say that he was a genius that would not be seen for the next 200 years? What if Poplar Fruit's performance on stage was terrible? If he continued to slander Yanghua and say that he couldn't do this or that, wouldn't it be a slap to his face if he really became a top supermodel in just a few days and amazed everyone on the runway? One of the reporters turned to Yanghua, who had yet to answer the question, and asked, "Mr. Leon, I would like to ask you something. Were you and Givenchy the ones who directed and acted out this video and the previous hype?" Givenchy's men didn't look too happy when they saw the 2 of them clash head-on. The host wanted to stand up and send the reporter away, but when he saw Poplar Fruit pick up the microphone, he swallowed the words in his throat. He did not want to steal the limelight. Poplar Fruit said calmly, "Before I came to Bali, I always thought that it was a romantic city on the banks of the Seine River, where the sound of violins was melodious and the pedestrians were polite." No one understood Poplar Fruit's answer. The reporter stood up and wanted to change the topic, but Poplar Fruit spoke again. "But these days, I'm still a little disappointed." Poplar Fruit shook his head and said, "After training, I read a lot of newspapers and found that the media in Bali is no different from the media in other parts of the world, including some entertainment tabloids that have no bottom line." The media below the stage felt their faces burning as they stared at him, dumbfounded. They thought to themselves, "Are you going to bombard us? Who do you think you are?" However, Poplar Fruit did not continue to ridicule him. He said, "There is a saying that goes, without investigation, you have no right to speak. My hard work and growth in the modeling industry are traceable. You can ignore it or criticize it. But if you don't investigate it, you will lose your integrity as a journalist if you accuse me of acting. Of course, you are more professional than I am. I am not a journalist, so I should not comment on your professionalism." Yanghua saw some people's angry eyes, and the corners of her mouth curved up slightly. She continued, "But I think that even if I did something really bad, and you can blame me, criticize me, or curse me, you shouldn't involve my friends, my family, and my country. I saw in yesterday's newspaper that my motherland was mentioned 8 times. Poplar Fruit said seriously, 8 times. It was as if they were standing there and proudly saying, "See, that kid is from China. He is destined to be useless and tarnish our fashion hall." Of course, the Sun didn't really say that. I just revealed some of the hidden truths in the report, some of the discrimination you want to express. Poplar Fruit raised his voice slightly and said, "Of course, before that, there were many reports that talked about my skin color." Some reporters had quietly lowered their heads. Only the Sun's reporter still straightened his chest and stared at Poplar Fruit with murderous hatred. "This makes me feel a little sad." Poplar Fruit said softly, "Try to think about it. If you cover your eyes and can't see my appearance, but only hear my voice that is no different from yours, you will treat me as someone with the same skin color or even the same country. How will you treat my success and failure? Think about it. If you see your neighbor's child can grow so much in just 10 days, what will your attitude be? Poplar Fruit paused and spat out a few words. Will you still question me? Chapter 746. Preaching words often made people feel uncomfortable. In fact, several reporters were looking at Poplar Fruit with dark faces. However, except for the Chinese reporter who shouted, "Come on, Poplar Fruit," in Chinese, most of the other reporters lowered their heads in shame. It was a miracle. Did they really regret it? That might not be the case. Reporters, especially entertainment reporters, were mostly trained to have an impenetrable thick skin. Just like the most noisy reporter from the Sun, the more you scolded him, the better he felt. So many people were persuaded by Poplar Fruit. It could only be said that Poplar Fruit's language charm was starting to work again. This guy had been teaching a lot this year. Although he didn't talk much, he was gradually getting closer to being an excellent teacher. His preaching rarely had the kind of passionate tone that was easy to resist. Instead, his voice was flat, with his unique magnetism. It was very pleasant to listen to and fascinated people. In addition, his command of French was so strong that it was like a native language. His choice of words and sentences was even better than the average French. Every word he said was like an elder who was tirelessly teaching. When he spoke, he created a mysterious atmosphere, making people feel like they were sitting in a classroom and listening to the teacher's guidance. It seemed that everything he said and every reason was right. The world should work like this, and we should start from the facts when we report the news. In a trance, every reporter who lowered their heads seemed to have experienced a spiritual baptism. Needless to say, they were ashamed and blamed themselves. Not apologizing to Poplar Fruit was already the bottom line for them. This guy should be teaching in school, a professor. Look at his mouth, tsk. Ricardo turned his head and muttered to Ardil. They were less affected because they were in high positions and saw the problem from a much higher angle than the reporters. Hey, don't say that. Ardil smiled and said, I heard from Leon that he is now studying, and the school wants him to stay and teach in the future. It wasn't easy to get rid of the atmosphere created by Poplar Fruit, but many reporters still couldn't recover. They felt that they should go back and reflect instead of still staying there to ask Poplar Fruit. The reporter from the Sun saw a group of useless colleagues, so he curled his lips and stood up to ask a question. Leon, yesterday Princess Charlotte confessed to you at the press conference. She said that you are a rare good man in the world. Are you willing to accept Princess Charlotte's confession? As soon as this question was asked, the whole venue suddenly became silent. Even the reporters who were blaming themselves looked up at Poplar Fruit. The Sun's reporter dug a big hole for Poplar Fruit. It was known that Princess Charlotte had never confessed to Poplar Fruit. Of course, it was true that he was a good man. The Sun's reporter made up a story about the princess confession from the beginning, and it was a fact that Poplar Fruit couldn't doubt. Then, he asked Poplar Fruit if he was willing to accept it. There was no answer to this question from the beginning. No matter how Poplar Fruit answered, he would jump into the hole. Would he accept it? Then it would be a big mistake. This was what the Sun wanted to see. Because of this, they could hype up this matter. As for whether he accepted it or not, it was impossible. The princess confessed to you, and you arrogantly refused? Who do you think you are? A yellow-skinned monkey dared to look down on the Monegasque royal family. Do you want to be the enemy of all of Europe? At this time, the host should have gone up to help Poplar Fruit, but he was also stunned at this time. As a result, he fell behind Poplar Fruit. At that time, Poplar Fruit had already spoken, and it was useless for him to stop it. In fact, Poplar Fruit had already expected this question. He raised the microphone, smiled, and said, "Did the princess confess to me? I am very confused about this question." Waving his hand, Poplar Fruit didn't give the Sun's reporter a chance to defend himself. He then said, "I met Princess Charlotte 3 times, and that was because the hotel that Ardil arranged for me happened to be the same as the one that the princess stayed in. 3 times, added up to less than 10 minutes, right? And then you said more words than you said to me today." Poplar Fruit laughed. Leon doesn't think that he is so charming that the princess likes him. After all, I am not a super handsome guy like Beckham or Cristiano Ronaldo. Poplar Fruit laughed self-deprecatingly. How do you know that the princess didn't really confess to you? The Sun's reporter said unhappily. You used a subjunctive tone. Poplar Fruit naughtily stretched out his left index finger and pointed at him, like a teacher catching a student who had made a mistake in grammar class. It means that your opinion on this matter is negative. That is to say, Princess Charlotte didn't actually confess to me. The Sun's reporter was stunned. He never thought that he would make a mistake in grammar. It should be known that not everyone could pick up on the small mistakes in grammar, including the many people in the room. Their attention was focused on how Yanghua answered, so naturally, they didn't bother to study his question. But Poplar Fruit did it. And it was a foreigner who heard his grammatical mistake. The Sun's reporter wished that there was a hole in the ground for him to crawl into. The subjunctive tone represented a hypothetical question, which was a grammatical habit that every French person was born with. All the reporters looked at him in unison. At this time, even if he wanted to quibble, it would be useless. However, Poplar Fruit wasn't willing to be vague on this issue. After he finished teasing the Sun's reporter, he didn't put down the microphone. He paused, then said, "Actually, my relationship with the princess can be completely assured. Let's not talk about the fact that there is nothing between us. Even if I knew the princess, we would at most be friends." Yanghua squinted his eyes and said with a smile, "Think about it, I am a father. I have a super cute daughter. At this point, you all know that at least I have no fate with the royal family." That's right. If he was a single father, what was the point of hype? Many reporters had this thought in their hearts. One had to know that although the royal power had declined, the traditional royal family still paid great attention to their own reputation. Needless to say, they couldn't let the princess become someone else's stepmother, right? This was something that no one could accept. Chapter 747. In the small lounge next to the conference hall, the housekeeper stood respectfully by the door, watching Kiki and Luo Danny. Of course, he did not forget to pour water and get snacks for the children. Luo Danny was better. After all, she was my daughter, 8 years old. She was not as naive and ignorant as Kiki. Moreover, she was educated to be a lady since she was a child, so she could still sit elegantly in the chair. Kiki was noisy. The little girl climbed on the sofa and rolled around, and then ran to Luo Danny's chair to learn her sitting posture. Of course, Kiki could not sit still. After a while, she lost interest and jumped down again, making the housekeeper sweat. The LCD TV in the room was broadcasting the Poplar Fruit's heroic posture in the conference hall. Kiki looked at it, but she did not stare at it as she did when she was a child. She was now an old fox. Kiki knew that this thing came from the TV. Even if there was a picture of her father on it, she would not believe that her father was really hiding in it. Most of the time, Chi-Chi was chatting with Sister Luo Danny on and off, and then glancing at the door guarded by the butler. How boring it was to stay in this small room. It was better to go out and find her father. However, what made Chi-Chi feel disheartened and unreconciled was that the old butler was too sharp. Every time Chi-Chi snuck a peek at him, he would look back at her with a smile, destroying Chi-Chi's little scheme in the bud. "Kiki, your father's words are so sharp." Luo Danny stared at the TV screen and said with admiration, "Look at those uncles, they were all persuaded by him. My papa has always been very powerful." Kiki supported herself on the soft sofa with one hand and raised the other hand high. She tilted her head and supported her belly, looking like she was very lazy and proud. Kiki did not understand what Luo Danny meant. Luo Danny sometimes attended those press conferences because she was shooting advertisements and doing endorsements. Although she was protected by her elders, she still felt the sharpness of those reporters' questions. In her mind, a hero who could suppress the heroes with a wave of his hand while talking and laughing was not an ordinary hero. Back in the conference hall, at this time, there was a sudden question in English. This was the first question in Spanish and the Chinese question from the reporter from China Fashion Illustrated. It was the third non-French question. The questioner was a reporter from America's Esports Frontline. Esports Frontline was not a mainstream media. They were an emerging media based on social networks, but because they mainly reported esports and gaming news, they had a very large fan base in Europe and the United States. The question he brought was also incompatible with the atmosphere of the press conference. Most people, including Poplar Fruit, were stunned. "Mr. Leon, Blizzard's Alan Kahn said that Hearthstone is the Hearthstone of Blizzard. Adkin said that Hearthstone was designed by you. May I ask if this information is true? What is Hearthstone?" A big question mark appeared on the heads of the fashion and entertainment reporters present. They knew about Blizzard, a big company that had produced many classic games. However, Hearthstone had not been officially released yet, so many people did not know about it. Poplar Fruit blinked and asked, "Wait a minute, what is the background of this matter that you are talking about?" Poplar Fruit's first reaction was that this matter had been leaked. He was somewhat like a frightened bird. He always felt that reporters liked to fabricate facts to deceive people. It's like this. The reporter who had just received the order from the headquarters in the United States and ran over to interview Poplar Fruit explained the situation in the United States. Although he spoke in English, English was more common than Spanish. Not many people could not understand it. At this time, everyone took out their phones and realized that there were already tens of millions of people on the internet who were clamoring to support Poplar Fruit. It's all Givenchy's fault for holding this press conference so early. However, that Hearthstone was designed by Poplar Fruit? What is going on? Isn't he a translator? How did it end up in the design of games? The reporters below the stage looked at each other, and Ardell's expression was not good. He felt that this guy was fabricating news to kill Poplar Fruit again. In the end, the reporter from eSports Frontline added, "By the way, director Lian, who filmed Brokeback Mountain, also said that he will work with you in the new movie. May I ask if this is also true?" Knowing that Alan had worked hard to support him yesterday, Poplar Fruit was very touched. After he went down, he would definitely call Alan to thank him personally. At this time, he raised the microphone and replied without hesitation, "Alan is not wrong. Hearthstone was designed by me." Poplar Fruit smiled. Before they could be surprised, he explained, "Of course, I can't design such a complicated game by myself. I only provided an idea. Most of the design and calculation of the data were done by my girlfriend alone." Regardless of whether he might have hurt some single people, Poplar Fruit smiled happily and said, "Originally, this was just a piece of entertainment between me and my girlfriend, but I didn't expect that when I went to visit my good friend Alan in the United States, he took a fancy to it. I have a closed beta account, and I played it. This is a very good card game." The reporter was actually also a game fan, so he couldn't help but praise. "Is that so?" Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Thank you very much for your praise. In fact, the main credit goes to Blizzard. As you know, the two of us have limited abilities. To further improve and even improve this game, and to design beautiful graphics, Blizzard is not stingy with their investment." Poplar Fruit stood up and bowed deeply. He said, "Here, I would like to thank Alan, my good friend forever, and so many fans who supported me. I know that you are only cheering for me because of Alan and this game, but Leon here promises you that I will not let you down." The reporter from eSports Frontline clapped his hands desperately. Then, without raising his head, he excitedly typed on his laptop. Poplar Fruit admitted it personally. This was big news. Poplar Fruit did not forget to thank Lian. After he finished his speech, he corrected, "Actually, I did not participate in Mr. Lian's new movie. This might be a misunderstanding. Mr. Lian's movie is adapted from Yang? Mr. Martel's book, Fantasy Drifting of the Young School, and I was fortunate enough to help Yang? Mr. Martel translate this book and introduce this excellent fantasy novel to the Chinese mainland." Poplar Fruit repeated this sentence in French, then smiled and said, "This book is very interesting. Although I have not seen Mr. Lian's new movie, I have enough confidence that this will be a very good and popular movie. If you have time in November, you can look forward to it." Chapter 748. After the press conference, various parties had different reactions. The media that supported Givenchy were, of course, cheering for him. They claimed that they had found a peerless genius who would shine during the Bali Fashion Week on the 30th. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit had moved back to the Givenchy Hall on the Champs-Élysées to practice with other models. He didn't have time to read the newspapers, otherwise, he would have blushed. The media supporting other fashion brands still maintained a one-sided strategy. They worked hard to criticize Poplar Fruit in print and on the internet, saying that he was a piece of gold on the outside, but a piece of gold on the inside, and that he would definitely show his true colors in the Fashion Week show. The Sun, which was neutral but had a grudge against Poplar Fruit, also joined the army of defaming Poplar Fruit. The Sun didn't care about Poplar Fruit's clarification at the press conference. They seized on some of the words of Poplar Fruit and continued to hype the relationship between the princess and Poplar Fruit. Chinese Rookie claims, "Even if the princess confesses in person, I won't accept it." The Sun intended to provoke the dissatisfaction of the European people. "Who do you think you are? How dare you talk nonsense when the princess is expressing her goodwill?" However, Givenchy was not easy to deal with. Their public relations department immediately took action. They intercepted the video of the conversation between Poplar Fruit and the Sun during the press conference and uploaded it to the internet, dealing a heavy blow to the Sun's distorted report. As a foreigner, Poplar Fruit spoke French so fluently, and he caught the language loophole of the Sun's reporter and successfully counterattacked. This also reflected Poplar Fruit's love and care for French. Many French people who felt respected were happy to repost the video on social media and major video websites, causing some people who didn't pay attention to fashion to know about it. Poplar Fruit became popular again in the French-speaking countries and regions. Many people liked the cute clip of Poplar Fruit naughtily clicking on the Sun's reporter. Of course, the Sun was once again criticized for its false and one-sided news. More neutral news agencies were much more cautious this time. They didn't dare to speak carelessly anymore. They were afraid that if they said something good, the poplar fruit wouldn't achieve it. If they said something bad, the poplar fruit would slap them in the face again. They only objectively reported what they saw at the press conference and did not make any comments of their own. Their harmonious appearance made people feel sleepy and bored. There were a few Asian media outlets at the press conference, including those from South Korea and Japan. Both countries had produced many supermodels. Of course, the most popular ones were Japan and China. The more famous ones, like Okamoto Toshiki and Lu Wen, were all ranked high on the international runway. Needless to say, the media's reports on poplar fruit were mostly neutral, and they definitely wouldn't put in any effort to put in a good word for poplar fruit. On the other hand, the previously mentioned China Fashion Weekly's report on poplar fruit showed one-sided praise. China Fashion Weekly was quite famous in the domestic fashion industry, and its voice also represented a certain degree of authority in the industry. They quoted poplar fruit's words to counter the other party's doubts at the press conference and wrote almost worshipfully, "Poplar fruit convinced all the foreign reporters wholeheartedly with his own strength. He is not alone now. He represents the backbone of China and the dignity of the Chinese people." Alright, China Fashion Weekly's praise of poplar fruit was a little too exaggerated, causing them to feel a little embarrassed at the end. At the end, China Fashion Weekly's evaluation of poplar fruit's achievements in the modeling industry was a little more serious. They said, poplar fruit entered the industry as a non-professional, but within a short month, he reached an amazing level. Although it seems that poplar fruit is still a certain distance away from the top of the world, at least they didn't directly push poplar fruit to the top of the world, otherwise, they would kill him. But we can see that he has shown excellent talent in this industry. In time, China will also have a male supermodel who can stand on the international stage. Poplar fruit was not the first Chinese model to stand on the world-class runway. Before him, many people had become famous, such as Lu Wen and so on. China Fashion Weekly first set off a big storm in the domestic fashion circle. Many celebrities and agencies were curious about this unknown big boy, and many agencies began to search for poplar fruit's information. Of course, the fashion circle and the entertainment circle were inextricably linked, and poplar fruit's news slowly spread. With curiosity, naturally, there were reporters who dug up poplar fruit's background. Some of poplar fruit's information that had been put on the table gradually surfaced: postgraduate at Higashiyama University, special teaching assistant, gold medal interpreter of Shinda Translation Company, deputy general manager of the small language business, chief translator of sect leader Qiao's biography, translator of the original work of director Li En's new movie. In the previous report of China Fashion Weekly, the news that poplar fruit and his girlfriend designed Hearthstone was widely spread. Many Blizzard fans were excited and immediately went to Chengdu to create a personal Weibo for poplar fruit. Also, the popular online micro-movie Unexpectedly, that poplar fruit had participated in was also dug up. Qianqiu once said that poplar fruit was a god who was proficient in 13 languages. Previously, many people doubted this statement, but now, many people were discussing the possibility of poplar fruit's fluency in French, Spanish, English, Indonesian, and Korean at the press conference. Most people felt that it should be true. Looking at poplar fruit's fluency in speaking, many professional students from famous universities felt ashamed. Later, this discussion even covered the news of poplar fruit appearing on the main stage of Bali Fashion Week as a model. This discussion reached its peak when Professor Luo Lin from Beijing International Studies University posted on Weibo to confirm this rumor. Did I see it wrong? Poplar fruit, this kid went to be a model? Haha, young people are really fun, but they are a bit too lazy. It should be true that Yang Guo is proficient in 13 languages, but I don't think he only knows 13 languages. You have to know that this kid has even learned Sanskrit, an ancient language that has declined. A mere 13 countries won't be a problem for him. Professor Luo Lin was a big celebrity. He once walked on the highly rated lecture room. His confirmation caused the topic to heat up again. Before poplar fruit became famous, the old news of Luo Lin throwing an olive branch to him was also dug up. That's right, I was very optimistic about poplar fruit, this kid. Unfortunately, he was snatched away by Higashiyama University. Damn it. Luo Lin posted on Weibo in response to a student's question. He used an indignant emoji and said, "He is very talented in languages and has a good personality. He is calm and low-key, a good seedling for learning. In time, maybe our country will have a master like Teacher G." Chapter 749. Professor Roland's words would make many people look at poplar fruit in a new light, and poplar fruit's performance on the runway and his handsome and wild photos would bring him many crazy fans. These were all for later. Before Poplar Fruit returned to China, the news would not spread like wildfire. No matter what others said, Poplar Fruit did not care. He focused on what was in front of him and seriously practiced with the other models. He wanted to achieve a good result for Givenchy on the main stage the day after tomorrow. On the first day, he changed his practice location to the 8th floor of the Givenchy Hall. He did not have to stay in the crowded 7th floor. There were a total of 14 models on the 8th floor, 9 women and 5 men. They were Givenchy's top models this year. Many of them had signed long-term contracts with Givenchy and had appeared for the company in the past few fashion weeks. They were not surprised to see Poplar Fruit. The newspapers were full of news about him, so they were all familiar with him. On the contrary, they were very curious about Poplar Fruit because Ricardo had come over yesterday and praised Poplar Fruit. They wanted to see what kind of model Ricardo praised so highly. Givenchy had always focused on the female market, so most of the models were female. In addition to the 5 male models, some of them were thin and feminine. It felt like the entire 8th floor was full of yin and yang. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit and the other 2 black male models had masculine figures, especially Poplar Fruit. When he changed into a pair of wolf head underwear that exposed his upper body, it felt like a ray of sunshine had lit up the entire space. Since their positions were fixed, the models on the 8th floor were not hostile to Poplar Fruit. After a round of practice, Poplar Fruit's excellent performance made them accept Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit had a disadvantage. He had been practicing by himself. Although he had 2 good teachers, he had been practicing alone for a long time, so he did not fit in with the team. Leon, your aura is too strong. After Poplar Fruit came down, Giselle pulled him aside and said, "You can't burst out a strong momentum from the beginning. Otherwise, the audience will feel uncomfortable." Fortunately, there was also a video playback. Poplar Fruit watched his own video. In front of him was a Caucasian female model who was more than 1.7 meters tall. She walked on the catwalk like a willow swaying in the wind. However, when she and Poplar Fruit walked on the catwalk, they were like tigers pouncing on their prey. The sharp contrast in aura made Poplar Fruit feel uncomfortable. Not only that, but when Poplar Fruit stepped off the stage, his aura also affected the models behind him. Fortunately, these models were the best in the industry. After a while, they adjusted themselves. "Did you see that?" Giselle asked. Poplar Fruit nodded and asked, "Giselle, what should I do?" Poplar Fruit's previous practice was to have a consistent momentum. However, the current situation made Poplar Fruit feel a little overwhelmed. Giselle frowned. She had a solution, but could it be used in such a short time? It was very difficult for a model to change his usual catwalk style in such a short time. On second thought, Giselle smiled with relief. She thought, others may not be able to do it, but Poplar Fruit can. Giselle pressed her right hand flat, raising and lowering it smoothly like a parabola. She explained, "Leon, try to see if you can restrain your aura at the beginning. You walk for a while, and then slowly release it after the model in front of you goes down. When you walk to the front, you completely burst out, as if you have reached the peak. Then, when you go back, slowly adjust your aura as well. Try not to affect others as much as possible." Giselle said, "Of course, if you can, it would be best if the starting point of your momentum and the ending point of your momentum are the same as the model you are passing. That would be the best." Poplar Fruit nodded as if he understood. He pondered for a moment and felt that this method was feasible. After all, his aura was emitted by himself through the mind formula of Xingyi boxing. What he needed to figure out was how to restrain and release his mind freely. As he pondered, the general director of the venue came over. The general director was a middle-aged white man in his early 50s. He had been serving Givenchy since the beginning of the new century, and even Ricardo had to be polite to him. Surprisingly, the general director didn't dislike Poplar Fruit as much as Jacques, the deputy director on the 7th floor. After he came over, he kindly asked Poplar Fruit if he wanted to change the order of appearance. This was a great favor to Poplar Fruit. After all, there were only 2 days left before the official appearance. If the order was changed, not only would it be difficult to arrange the costumes, but it would also affect the rhythm of many models. Giselle was afraid that Poplar Fruit would agree rashly, so she helped him decline. She smiled and said, "Mr. Mun, it's okay. Please give him another half an hour. I believe that Leon can adjust himself." Giselle refused because she saw Poplar Fruit's performance when he tried to walk in the open space by himself. On the other hand, she had to force Poplar Fruit to practice the ability to restrain and release his momentum in a short time. Poplar Fruit had more than one costume to perform. Givenchy had half a day to perform on the main stage of the Louvre. The other 14 models present each had to perform 4 to 6 outfits, while Poplar Fruit had to perform all of Ardell's outfits, the men's part. These outfits were interspersed throughout the whole process. If Poplar Fruit didn't fit in with the others, the rhythm of Givenchy's main stage would be disrupted. Now, Poplar Fruit could only adapt to everyone, not everyone accommodating to him. I hope you can understand my painstaking efforts. Giselle thought to herself as she looked at Poplar Fruit, who was still pondering. Of course, Poplar Fruit wouldn't let her down. In less than half an hour, Poplar Fruit had figured out a prototype of retracting and releasing his momentum. He couldn't control it at will yet, so he had to start from scratch and end at zero. It was somewhat disharmonious, but it was much better than before. There wasn't much time left. She couldn't let Poplar Fruit continue to ponder. Giselle asked Poplar Fruit to go back to the team rehearsal first, and he would continue to ponder at night. Giselle didn't know that Poplar Fruit had found a breakthrough in his martial arts. When he practiced the realm of mind of Xingyi boxing, he had focused on firmness and fierceness. Now, in order to be able to retract and release freely, he tried to integrate the soft force of Tai Chi in just half an hour. Poplar Fruit had made a lot of progress. It was more and more difficult for him to improve his martial arts after he entered the realm of supreme power. Now, he had made a big leap. And it seemed that there was still a lot of room for improvement. If it weren't for the occasion, Poplar Fruit would have roared to his heart's content and waved his fists and feet to show his excitement. Chapter 750. It was around 7:00 in the evening in Bali. Poplar Fruit had finished his work and fed Kiki, who had followed Sister Luo Danny to play in the afternoon. He took out his phone and looked at the time. It was around 11:00 in the morning in America, where Fong Beibei was. Finally, he didn't have to call so early in the morning. This way, Kiki could also talk to Fong Beibei. Poplar Fruit thought and called Fong Beibei. "Uncle, are you done?" Fong Beibei's voice was soft. It seemed like she was still jet-lagged and was very tired. Why are you so tired? Didn't you sleep well when you arrived in America yesterday?" Poplar Fruit asked. His tone sounded like he was blaming her, but he was more concerned about her. "I slept for a long time on the plane. When I arrived at the hotel, it was already late at night. I didn't feel sleepy at all. You were training at that time. So, I chatted with my senior for the whole night. I woke up in the morning to go shopping. When I came back to the hotel, I was so tired." Fong Beibei yawned and said, "Then, why don't you sleep for a while? We can talk again tomorrow?" Poplar Fruit was worried about his girlfriend and was about to hang up the phone. "Don't!" Fong Beibei shouted. She laughed and said, "I'm lying on the bed. Talk to me. I want to hear your voice. I didn't call you yesterday because I was on the plane." Poplar Fruit felt warm in his heart, but he couldn't help but scold her. "When can't you hear my voice? Hurry up and sleep. Anyway, we can talk again tomorrow. Why don't I give you twice the time tomorrow?" "Don't talk about tomorrow. I get angry when you mention tomorrow," Fong Beibei said angrily. "Why?" Poplar Fruit asked. "You don't know. Our team leader is so mean." Fong Beibei pouted and said, "Today, we were suddenly notified that from tonight onwards, our mobile phones will be confiscated and we will enter a closed training before the competition. Didn't you say that mobile phones and other communication devices can only be used during the 3 days of the competition?" Poplar Fruit asked doubtfully. "Yeah. He said he was afraid that we wouldn't be able to control ourselves, so he gave us 4 days to get used to it." Fong Beibei said unhappily, "I don't know why they are so crazy. I heard from senior brother and senior sister that they didn't have such a request in the past." Poplar Fruit frowned and said, "You can't contact your family for 7 consecutive days? Isn't this too inhumane?" "I've asked around. I heard that in the previous season, a team from Shanghai was caught using a mobile phone during a competition." Shenhong's voice suddenly came from the other end of the line. Fong Beibei was staying in the same room as senior sister Shenhong in the hotel. Although it's just that she couldn't bear the pressure and confided in her family and didn't really cheat, it's still treated as cheating. It has a bad influence, so many schools have adopted this strategy this year. Senior sister. Hearing the voice, Poplar Fruit could imagine Fong Beibei on the other end of the line getting up from the bed with a red face and shyly shouting, "You eavesdropped on my phone call. Haha, you were talking to your boyfriend on the phone so loudly that I heard it as soon as I came in. You can't blame me." Shenhong laughed and said jokingly, "I'll talk to you in the safe passage." Fong Beibei was shy. She was still too shy to whisper sweet nothings to Poplar Fruit in front of senior sister, so she ran out shyly. At this time, Kiki ran back to the room and saw her father talking on the phone. Kiki swayed her beautiful wet hair and ran over happily. Her fluffy pajamas made her look like a koala bear. She hugged her father's calf and wanted to rub against it. "Papa. Kiki stared at him with her big eyes and curiously waved her little hand. She asked, "Papa, who are you calling? Is it Sister Bebe?" Don't look at how muddle-headed this little fellow is, sometimes her sixth sense is very accurate. She saw the happy smile on her father's face and vaguely felt that it should be Sister Bebe. Dad hasn't taken a shower yet. Don't rub against me, or you'll stink again. Poplar Fruit quickly held Kiki down with one hand and said to her, "It's Sister Bebe. Dad wants you to say hello to Sister Bebe later." Just a greeting was definitely not enough to satisfy Chi-Chi. Kiki continued to pull her father's right hand, trying to pull him down and snatch the phone from him. Needless to say, the little girl had a lot of strength. She could even push a heavy wooden chair with great difficulty. Woo! Kiki pulled her father's hand while stamping her little feet. She pouted and unhappily called out, "Kiki misses Sister Bebe. Papa, let me answer the phone, okay?" The last sentence, okay, was not a question or an imperative sentence. It was an emphasis sentence with a coquettish nasal sound. Kiki was a little impatient and did not want to wait a moment longer. "Uncle, let Kiki answer the phone. I'll talk to her." Fong Bebe heard the commotion and said with a grin, "I haven't seen Kiki in a long time. I miss her too." Poplar Fruit was a little depressed. He looked at Kiki and felt a little awkward. He did not say much to his girlfriend and she was snatched away by Kiki. This feeling was really not good. Hee, uncle, don't be jealous. I'll talk to you later. Be good." Fong Bebe seemed to feel Poplar Fruit's reluctance and said with a smile. Poplar Fruit could only angrily pass the phone to Kiki. If it was in the past, Kiki would hold the phone and talk with half of her face pressed against it. However, perhaps because the weather was a little hot and the phone screen was a little hot from her father's hand, Kiki did not do so. Thus, Poplar Fruit saw Kiki familiarly fumble for the buttons to light up the screen. Then, she pressed the power amplifier and put the phone on the sofa. She climbed up and happily chatted with Fong Bebe. This feeling is really making me angry." That's right, Poplar Fruit was jealous of his daughter. Just a moment ago, he wanted to let Kiki talk to Fong Bebe, but he did not expect the little girl to turn the tables and directly push him away. Poplar Fruit stood in the same place for a few seconds and began to walk around impatiently. 1 minute, 2 minutes passed, but Kiki and Fong Bebe were still chatting in full swing. Looking at Kiki's wet hair, Poplar Fruit found something for himself to do. He took a soft and clean towel from the bathroom and sat behind Kiki to dry her hair. Kiki unhappily twisted her little butt, pouted her little mouth and looked back at her father. Then, she complained to Fong Bebe, "Papa is bad. I'll dry your hair for you. It won't affect you talking to Sister Bebe." Poplar Fruit said righteously, "Dry it so you can sleep well later." It seemed to make sense, but Kiki faintly felt that her father did it on purpose. She said angrily to the phone, "Papa is bad. Big bad wolf." Hearing the voice, Fong Bebe felt as if she was there. Seeing Poplar Fruit's jealous expression, she could not stop laughing on the other end of the phone. Chapter 751. Kiki and Fong Bebe's conversation was also interesting. Poplar Fruit didn't pay attention to it at first, but after he put away his silly jealousy, he found that the little guy's innocent words were so funny. Chi-Chi had probably tried her best to introduce Fong Bebe to Uncle Cool and his family who had come to visit this afternoon. "Little sister has a name," Kiki said. "Brother Romeo told me that her name is Harper, and Severn. Brother Cruz said 6, 7, 8, night, 10, 7. Poplar Fruit was somewhat puzzled. Why are there 2 names? Maybe it's a surname? Poplar Fruit thought, it could also be a middle name. Did Kiki politely say hello to uncle and auntie, as well as brothers and sisters? Fong Bebe asked with a smile. Yes. Kiki spoke in English and explained, "My brothers can't speak French. But Kiki's English is better than Sister Luo Danny's." "Well, Kiki is great," Fong Bebe praised. Poplar Fruit chuckled. He knew that Fong Bebe didn't fully understand. Although Fong Bebe's English has passed CET4, it still remains at the level of mute English. Poplar Fruit estimated that if she went out to the supermarket to buy some daily necessities, she would be in a hurry. "Uncle." Fong Bebe heard Poplar Fruit's laughter. The two of them seemed to have a tacit understanding of each other's thoughts. She immediately pouted. Sister Luo Danny told Kiki that Brother Romeo is a bit bad. Kiki complained to Fong Bebe somewhat indignantly. "Why?" Fong Bebe asked. "That is, just before, Sister Luo Danny went to celebrate Brother Romeo's birthday." Chi-Chi spoke very seriously, but she still needed to think about how to use the words. However, she still chose to express it in English. "He telled Rodney, I love you." Fong Bebe was somewhat confused. It means that Romeo told Luo Danny that I like you. Poplar Fruit laughed. I can understand. Fong Beibei snappily said. It's that simple, it's not like I haven't watched US dramas. Kiki frowned and thought. She took her father's hand, shook her head and said, no, love is not like. Papa, didn't you say that love is love? Papa often says this sentence to Kiki. Okay. Poplar Fruit waved his hand, he just wanted to use a lighter word, he didn't expect to be exposed by Kiki. It's I love you. But, Kiki finally said the doubts in her heart, isn't love something that Papa said to Kiki? Why did brother Romeo tell sister Luo Danny? It's all Poplar Fruit's fault. When he explained this sentence to Kiki, he was worried that his daughter would foolishly say I love you to other boys, and then deceive her that this sentence can only be a little secret between Papa and Kiki. Kiki thought for a long time but still couldn't figure it out. When Kiki said it, Poplar Fruit also remembered. He laughed twice, he didn't know how to answer. Fortunately, Fong Beibei was there, she smiled and explained to Kiki, like means that you think someone or a fun toy is very good, so you say you like it. For example, Kiki likes Barbie dolls, right? Yes. Kiki nodded. But love is like. Fong Beibei said in a very gentle voice, I don't know how many times like is like, anyway, Kiki has to remember, love is like you like very much, you want to be with him all the time, if you leave him, you feel like the world is about to collapse. This is called love. Poplar Fruit was a little moved in his heart, he felt that Fong Beibei's words were not only for Kiki, but also for him. Thinking about how Fong Beibei was so sleepy that she kept yawning and wanted to listen to his voice, Poplar Fruit felt his heart soften. Kiki tilted her head, she didn't understand why the world would collapse. With Kiki's current level of logic, these abstract concepts were still very difficult to understand. However, she still said as if she understood, oh. Kiki also wants to be with Papa. So Kiki doesn't like, but loves Papa. Oh right. Fong Beibei laughed, then does Kiki love Sister Beibei? Kiki pouted her mouth and thought for a while, she looked very serious, then nodded and said, Kiki also loves Sister Beibei. Sister Beibei, after Kiki goes back with Papa, can I still live with Sister Beibei? That depends on your father's performance. Fong Beibei said somewhat deliberately. Unexpectedly, Kiki was a little depressed, she said with grievance, why? Is it because Sister Beibei doesn't love Kiki anymore? The little girl felt so wrong that her big eyes were filled with mist, and her voice was also a little sad. No, your Sister Beibei said that Papa still has to work hard, then she will live with us. Poplar Fruit quickly explained. However, Poplar Fruit's explanation seemed to be a little profound to Kiki, and it didn't have any effect. Fong Beibei said unhappily, Aya, uncle, don't interrupt. Kiki, of course Sister Beibei loves you. Don't worry, sister will still be with Kiki when I go back, and then we will drive your father out, okay? Poplar Fruit sweated profusely. Don't. Kiki finally didn't feel wronged, she also giggled, Sister Beibei also wants to love Papa, that way, Papa, Kiki, and Sister Beibei can never be separated. The little girl felt that she had found a particularly clever way, and happily danced on the sofa. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei didn't say anything, they sat quietly with a smile, listening to Kiki's laughter, as if there was a kind of warm feeling flowing between each other's hearts. After snatching the phone from Kiki's hand with great difficulty, Poplar Fruit also chatted with Fong Beibei for a while. Tomorrow? Or the day after tomorrow? Is it the day after tomorrow? Fong Beibei was a little too sleepy, it was a little difficult to calculate the time difference, she yawned and said, you should be on the stage soon. Uncle, don't be too stressed. Fighting. Fong Beibei didn't learn English well, she learned this cheering phrase from watching variety shows in South Korea. From tomorrow onwards, I can't contact you. I don't know if I'll be secretly caught to sell pigs, Fong Beibei said with a pout, but I'm still waiting for your good news. What are you talking about? Idiot. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, I'll also be waiting for your good news, baby, do your best in the competition. I will. With Uncle's secret book, we'll win the big prize this year. Fong Beibei waved her hands and shouted softly with joy. She was in the hotel's safe passage, although there was no one around, she still couldn't shout. I believe in you too. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, okay, baby, go to sleep. Look at how sleepy you are. Quickly adjust your state, we'll see you in a week. Hey, stupid uncle, you're the big idiot. Fong Beibei said with a smile, how can it be just a week? You're in Bali, I'm in LA, how can we go home in a week? Poplar Fruit smiled and didn't say anything, but his eyes were shining like stars. Chapter 752. The last day of rehearsals was like a war. They were busy for a whole day. They didn't care about their stamina and crazily rehearsed. This made Yanggua's strong body feel a little tired. This was because Yanggua was in good health. If it were another weak model, they would have to do 2 full rehearsals and more than 10 small rehearsals. But Yanggua walked more than 200 times on the catwalk. If it were someone else, they would be so tired that they would collapse on the ground. Yin Xingyu and Yi Jing also boarded the plane in China. Poplar Fruit arranged everything with them over the phone, but he was destined to have no time to pick them up at the airport. Fortunately, he had a good assistant, Fang Min. With her help, Poplar Fruit was relieved. After the 2 students arrived, Poplar Fruit asked Fang Min to take them to the major scenic spots in Bali. The tickets to the main stage were too difficult to get, so Poplar Fruit could only give them tickets to the other stages behind. So, before that, they could go where they wanted to go, and they could also go shopping. After all, many luxury goods in Bali were very cheap compared to the prices in China. In the evening, Poplar Fruit did not translate for another 2 hours before going to bed. Instead, he gave himself a chance to relax. Tomorrow, he would perform on the main stage of the Louvre, which was the focus of the world's attention. Poplar Fruit was very excited. Although I will not continue in this industry in the future, Poplar Fruit was still a playful person. He touched Kiki's soft bangs and murmured, "I will seize this opportunity to show you, who look down on me, my strength." Although he liked to keep a low profile, Poplar Fruit still had his own pride. If he did not do it, he would not do it, but if he did, he must be the first. He would not say this to others, but he would prove it with his actions. After a pause, Poplar Fruit turned on the computer and clicked on a video software on the desktop. He glanced at Kiki, who was sleeping soundly beside him. Her little face was tender, her nose was gently moving, and her breathing was a little long. The little girl was still in a deep sleep, so the soft sound of the video wouldn't disturb her. Therefore, Poplar Fruit did not put on his headphones. He just lowered the volume. Only a small light was turned on in the bedroom. The flickering light from the screen reflected on Poplar Fruit's face, illuminating his gentle smile. "I heard from Uncle Long that Kiki's father, Poplar Fruit's uncle, is going to compete with a lot of people in Bali," said a small voice in the dark foreground. It was Xiong Xiaofeng's voice. Poplar Fruit recognized it. His non-standard Mandarin was too distinguishable. However, Xiong Xiaofeng misunderstood. Poplar Fruit was not competing with anyone. He was just on the tea stage. However, fashion was too far away from children. He still couldn't understand. So today, we, Xiong Xiaofeng and the other students of Poplar Fruit, decided to send our blessings to Uncle Poplar Fruit. With Xiong Xiaofeng's long-winded confession, the video screen began to light up. The video was sent to him by Fat Dragon in the morning, saying that it was a little gift from the children on the mountain. Poplar Fruit had not had time to watch it yet. The video camera was the DV that Poplar Fruit used for teaching and left behind. Compared to other cheap cameras on other computers, this DV was much more playable. Xiong Xiaofeng was in charge of the camera. This little guy was not very interested in his studies, but recently, he had dug out his own interests. He liked to shoot videos and learn how to edit videos from Fat Dragon. According to Fat Dragon, Xiong Xiaofeng was still very talented in this area. Usually, he did not dare to shoot with expensive DV. He played very happily with low-resolution cameras that cost dozens of yuan. Fat Dragon also specially found some online materials for him to learn by himself. Fat Dragon had mentioned this to Poplar Fruit before, and Poplar Fruit was very supportive. However, Poplar Fruit also called Xiong Xiaofeng and specifically told him not to give up on his studies and that he could develop his hobbies in his spare time. Xiong Xiaofeng gave Poplar Fruit a lot of inspiration. If more people joined the remote teaching in the future, he should enrich the content of extracurricular teaching so that children could freely develop their own interests after school. In this society, people who had a skill were more popular. His thoughts were somewhat off track, and Poplar Fruit's attention returned to the computer screen. Xiong Xiaofeng's video still stopped at the transfer of the portrait, and the editing was also very inexperienced. However, such a video served the content, and the technique did not need to be too demanding. Teacher Yang. Many children's smiling faces flashed by, like a photo, and they stopped abruptly after saying this name. Poplar Fruit laughed. "Interesting. Come on." Xiong Xiaolin shouted with her fists clenched. In front of the camera, she was still very shy, and her voice was like a mosquito. On the contrary, the other children were more open. They faced the camera, or laughed, or hooked their arms around each other's shoulders. There were also those who climbed the trees and shouted down. Many children cheered for Poplar Fruit in Miao, and 2 of them who were good at learning stuttered in English. These children were really tormenting. Poplar Fruit laughed and scolded in his heart. In fact, how was he unhappy? He was obviously very moved, but he still pretended to be. Perhaps he was reluctant to waste the material, or he borrowed some movie editing style, but Xiong Xiaofeng added some highlights at the end. For example, my daughter wanted to learn how to cheer in English, but she forgot the words. She blushed and waved at Xiong Xiaofeng and shouted, "Oh, no." Again. Xiong Xiaofeng smiled and said, "No need, this is it." Then the two of them chased each other and played together. This group of children. Poplar Fruit's moved emotions were disrupted by their noise. Originally, he wanted to be moved to tears. In fact, we are not isolated and helpless in Bali, are we? Poplar Fruit thought about the roller coaster ride in September. There were 2 times when he was besieged by almost all the newspapers he saw. The first time, it was Ardil who shielded him from the wind and rain. The second time, there were many more people who supported him. Not to mention Givenchy and Princess Charlotte, even the otaku boss Alan, who was far away in America, posted 10 Weibo posts for him. Now, there were so many children who filmed and edited a congratulatory video for him. Poplar Fruit suddenly felt that he was not alone. In fact, he was the happiest person in the world. And Kiki. Poplar Fruit put down the computer and kissed his daughter's forehead with a smile. He still remembered that Kiki said before going to bed that she would go to the scene with sister Luo Danny to see her father. Perhaps she was a little uncomfortable after the kiss. Kiki wrinkled her little nose and rubbed her head. Then she turned over and continued to sleep facing her father. The lights were turned off. Poplar Fruit lay on the bed with his eyes wide open. There were so many lovely people supporting him. Tomorrow, he would not let them down. Chapter 753. Even though it was just the opening ceremony, Bali Fashion Week had many attractions. Duleli Garden, Bali Palace, and other high-end venues would become the main stages of the fashion show. Among them, the most dazzling and important main stage was the Carousel Hall in the Louvre. The Louvre was one of the top 3 museums in the world, a veritable palace of art. Walking in the Louvre, Poplar Fruit had mixed feelings. On one hand, he was amazed by the art treasures. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore the historical elements of the Louvre. Although the Louvre Museum claimed to have 400,000 treasures, everyone knew that most of them were looted. Among them, only a small part of the Chinese collections in the Fontainebleau Palace were gifts from Siamese masters. The rest were looted from the Summer Palace by France in 1860. Even if he knew, what could he do? Yanghua heaved a sigh of frustration in her heart. It would be great if he could steal all of them. Poplar Fruit thought fiercely in his heart. He could only let his imagination run wild. Not to mention whether Yanghua had this ability, even if he did, Yanghua wouldn't take this risk to do bad things. He was now shouldering a small family. Poplar Fruit carried Kiki and followed the crowd to the Carousel Hall. That's Leon. Yanghua was 1.88 meters tall. Even in Europe and the United States, where people were generally tall, he was quite eye-catching. His handsome face and skin color were different from most of the people present, making him feel like a crane in a flock of chickens. He was immediately spotted by the reporters who had yet to enter the Louvre Museum. Poplar Fruit was in the limelight this autumn during the Bali Fashion Week. Since 10 days ago, almost 1/3 of the newspapers in Bali had been following Poplar Fruit's news. The most popular time was after Princess Charlotte's press conference. Because the royal princess and celebrities also joined in, more than half of the media seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. It was hard to say whether Poplar Fruit's current image was good or bad, or whether it was good or bad, but the public loved it. They were very curious as to how such a small fry could have so many connections with so many big shots. Seeing the reporters swarming over, Poplar Fruit hurriedly carried his daughter and ran all the way to the safe area of the hall. Even so, the reporters outside were still attacking the security guards. Ardil somehow got rid of the reporters. He quietly walked to Poplar Fruit's side and said with a smile, "You must have a lot of troubles after becoming famous, right?" Poplar Fruit nodded with deep feelings. "When you're on the main stage, you'll have even more worries." Ardil's smile was kind of annoying. "But there's also fame and fortune behind the troubles. I can only say that it's painful and happy." Poplar Fruit smiled, shook his head, and said, "Ardil, you know I'm not interested in this." Ardil waved his hand and said with a smile, "All right. By the way, there's something I forgot to tell you." Ardil laughed and said, "Have you seen the BBC's film crew?" "Ah?" Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. He looked at the middle of the hall, where some staff members wearing BBC vests were busy. But what did that have to do with him? "I sold the video of your training to the BBC," Ardil said with a smile. "They came to film your first stage performance. Why did you sell it to them?" Poplar Fruit frowned and asked in surprise. He wasn't angry, but he didn't understand Ardil's intention. The BBC wanted to use your video to make a documentary about the growth of a talented model. Ardil waved his hand and smiled. I thought it was a good publicity opportunity, and they offered a good price, so I sold it. But you can rest assured that the money has been transferred to your account. Ardil patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder and said. It has nothing to do with money. Poplar Fruit shook his head and said, forget it. Anyway, it can promote your clothes. I accept it. But why did you give me the money? I don't care about this little money. If it weren't for you, these videos would just be a few memory cards. Ardil laughed. After all, it was you who filmed it. Poplar Fruit asked. Ardil said indifferently, didn't you tell me that you were doing charity education? Charity costs a lot of money. Just treat it as a token of my sincerity. If you don't want it, help me donate it to your charity fund. Charity fund? Poplar Fruit's heart skipped a beat. Before he became a remote teaching volunteer, he paid for it out of his own pocket. He had never thought about setting up a fund. However, now that he had a small team, and he might need to collect donations from society in the future, it would be more convenient to have a well-established fund. It would also be a positive promotion for remote teaching. If that's the case, I accept it. After returning to China, I will set up a fund and invest the money you gave me, Poplar Fruit said seriously. Ardil didn't care. Time was tight. He waved his hand and asked his personal hairstylist, Victor, and makeup artist, Matisse, to take Poplar Fruit to prepare. He also took Kiki with him. Although Kiki was reluctant to leave, she knew that her father had to work. Soon, she would be able to see her father on the stage again, so she obediently followed Ardil's grandfather and Luo Danny to their VIP seats. Hi, Kiki. There were already people waiting for them at the VIP seats. Hello, Uncle Cool, Auntie. Hello, Brooklyn, Romeo, Cruz. Chi-Chi was with Luo Danny, greeting her politely. If Poplar Fruit were there, he would have exclaimed, what Uncle Cool? Isn't this Beckham? Good morning, Kiki. Beckham and his wife also responded with a smile. He was muscular and covered in tattoos. He held his baby Xiao-Chi in his arms, and his face was full of tenderness. He had never loved his three sons so much. Xiao-Chi was more than 2 months younger than Kiki, but looking at her height, she looked 2 years younger. However, she and Kiki were both cute. Kiki, why don't I see your father? Victoria asked curiously. She had seen Kiki 3 times, but she didn't see Kiki's father. The Becks were also very fond of Chi-Chi. Not only was Chi-Chi polite, she was extroverted, witty, and as beautiful as a little fairy. To be honest, a child like Kiki was more popular than Luo Danny, who was always well behaved. Papa is working. Kiki replied politely. Then, her attention was immediately diverted. Kiki and Luo Danny couldn't help but love Xiao-Chi. They ran to Beckham's side and looked at Xiao-Chi. Beckham had become more and more obsessed with his daughter. His Twitter was all about Xiao-Chi. Now, he happily took out his mobile phone and took a picture of himself, Xiao-Chi, Kiki, and Luo Danny. Then he tweeted, oh, Xiao-Chi's 2 friends are here to see her. Xiao-Chi, you are really a heartthrob. Hee hee. Love you. Chapter 754. A grand event like the Bali Fashion Week also gathered many celebrities and even politicians. For example, French President Hollande, who had just taken office this year, also attended the opening ceremony in the Carousel Hall of the Louvre. Fortunately, leaders were not allowed to speak like this in foreign countries. If Hollande really went up and talked for an hour or two, he would definitely be scolded to death when he went back. The opening ceremony of Fashion Week was actually the debut ceremony of the chief designers of major brands. Chanel's Karl Marx, the Empress Dowager Lagerfeld, LV's Marc Jacob, Marco, and Givenchy's Riccardo walked out one by one and waved to the audience. Every designer that came out received thunderous applause. It wasn't an exaggeration to call him the Caesar Emperor of the fashion world. Although he was almost 80 years old, his hair was white, but he was still full of energy. He wore a sparkling diamond-studded suit jacket, a high-collared shirt, and black skinny jeans. He wore black fingerless gloves and his signature pure black sunglasses. For some reason, his belt had been replaced with a string of shiny pearls. The old man's clothes were always so classic, but there was always a little novelty that made people crazy. Without needing anyone's support, he straightened his back and walked around the field in an imposing manner. Everywhere he went, whether they were Chanel employees or fans, they couldn't help but cheer and clap for him. Karl didn't say a word, didn't move, and didn't even smile. However, his experience and grasp of fashion were enough to firmly control the momentum of the scene in his hands. He looks like the Terminator. Poplar Fruit watched from afar, his heart filled with emotion. Poplar Fruit had enough presence on the catwalk, but compared to Grandpa Xing, he was still far behind. This couldn't be helped. There were probably not many people in the fashion industry in the world who could compete with the old man. This was a temperament that had been honed over the years and cultivated through his own time. I sing for the world tyrant. Ardil was not qualified to walk around the hall, but Poplar Fruit could still faintly feel Ardil's inner desire. Didn't he also want to have a moment of glory and the admiration of the entire audience? He had been concentrating on his cultivation for dozens of years. Many people thought that Ardil was not good enough. There were even many negative opinions in the newspaper about Ardil. Ardil was already in his 50s, almost 60 years old. How could he keep up with the trends of the times? Poplar Fruit did not see it that way. What is fashion? Was it a flag that represented the trend? However, many of the fashions released during the Fashion Week were only sold in some of the more open cities. The public's taste and pursuit were still far from the fashion scene. Therefore, fashion was a very mysterious thing. It wasn't that it wasn't fashionable if it couldn't keep up with the trend. Wasn't there a period of retro fashion a few years ago? Besides, it wasn't that Ardil couldn't keep up with the trend. He was in the middle of the trend. Poplar Fruit felt that Ardil's understanding of clothes was really good. Before, he had lacked inspiration and could only make clothes of an average level. Now, didn't he have inspiration? Look at the series of splash ink fashion designs, isn't it? Even the simple ink dots had been used by him. In time, Ardil would definitely be able to walk in this palace of art, under the eyes of the whole world. Poplar Fruit believed in him. The opening ceremony didn't last long. With the departure of political celebrities such as Olan and the Queen of England, and the emergency arrangement of the staff, the fashion show in the middle of the hall was ready. The first wave of performances officially began at 10 o'clock. Givenchy was not considered a big name in front of Chanel and LV, so the order of its performances was a bit awkward. Chanel opened the show, LV was the finale in the evening, and Givenchy was the one who had just returned from the intermission in the afternoon. The clothes that Chanel showed this year were really beautiful. Poplar Fruit felt that it was in line with Ardil's philosophy. That was, the simple patterns had extremely complex changes. Even the same kind of clothes could be made into hundreds of different shapes. Like a dress, it could be designed as a white skirt, but the shoulders and the ends of the hem were fluffy and spongy lace. Speaking of which, it seemed that this year, Karl wanted to focus on the clothes that looked like water. The frills on this dress looked like sponge, and the colorful ribbons on the next dress looked like seaweed. If one didn't see it with their own eyes, it would be hard to imagine how he could make people feel as if they were swimming in the bottom of the sea without sketching out the appearance of the creatures in the sea. Later, it was said that Karl used fabrics that he didn't even know what they were for some of the clothes. These fabrics could let the light directly pass through the lines of the clothes, making this series of clothes show the colorful color of fritillary. It was hard to compare Ardil's design with Karl's. After all, the two series of clothes were designed from different directions. Ardil used simple colors of black, white, and gray to create a two-dimensional or three-dimensional world. Karl, on the other hand, used the combination of design and materials to draw out a lifelike world of water for you. In terms of creativity, Ardil might be better, but in terms of presentation, Karl was more experienced and astute. Of course, fashion was never just a set of clothes. After all, it was worn by people. Sometimes, the role of people was not less than that of clothes. In this regard, Poplar Fruit felt that Chanel was a little weak, because Chanel's main market was women's clothing. From the beginning to the end, Poplar Fruit had not seen a single male model. Looking at it, he couldn't help but feel a little tired. Not only that, but the femininity of women lasted for 3 whole hours. Even if there were some gender-neutral clothes, when worn by Chanel's models, why would they feel affectionate and seductive? This might be a chance for Givenchy. If the audience was tired of looking at women's clothes, they might find a balance in Givenchy's clothes, or they might find the familiar masculinity. After watching Chanel's show, Poplar Fruit suddenly felt a strong sense of confidence. However, during this period, there was still an hour to reorganize. During this time, celebrities close to Chanel would take photos in the show, and then Givenchy's staff would quickly and deftly change the stage background designed by them. During this time, Poplar Fruit had no time to visit Kiki or take photos with Mr. Zhou, the spokesperson of Chanel in China. He needed to touch up his makeup and make the final preparations. Tidy up these clothes. You'll have to change as soon as you come down. The pace was getting faster and faster. The staff serving Poplar Fruit quickly shuttled through the crowd, like soldiers in a fortress. The war was about to start. Chapter 755. At noon, the Carousel Hall was once again filled with new audiences. Because of Chanel's departure, there were some empty seats in the auditorium. Therefore, some fashion buyers who had gotten tickets but were not qualified to watch the opening ceremony came in one after another, filling up the remaining empty seats. Speaking of which, most of the celebrities were there to join in the fun and expand their social circle. Only these fashion buyers were the ones who really knew the business. Therefore, it was not necessarily a bad thing to have them in the audience. Therefore, in the audience, Poplar Fruit did not notice that in a remote corner, there were two yellow-skinned people sitting together. The man was wearing a baseball cap and a pair of sunglasses, holding a camera as long as a cannon barrel in his hand, looking very low-key. The woman was dressed in a white, pleated dress. Her beauty was enough to attract a lot of attention, but because of her position, her indifferent eyes, and silent expression, she was like a stone sinking into the sea when she sat in the crowd. She was silent. She glanced around the Givenchy stage, and then didn't move again. That oppressive and cold aura, there was no need to guess that she was Duan Xueqing. Duan Xueqing had only been in Bali for a few days. She did not speak French and was not good at socializing, so naturally, she did not know that Poplar Fruit was in the teeth of the storm. The man next to her was Pai Dinwan. After he met up with Duan Xueqing, he had been staying in a hotel booked by the Duan family's boutique. It was not because the Duan family's boutique was awesome that they were able to get tickets to the main stage of the opening ceremony. These tickets were actually sent out by Givenchy. Because the clothes designed by Ardil had a lot of Chinese elements, although they claimed that they were not trying to open up the Eastern market, they still paid attention to what they should. The top-ranked boutiques in the country received invitations, and the Duan family magically received 2 more invitations. In fact, those invitations were obtained by the masterminds behind the leak of Poplar Fruit's information. They were snatched from other boutiques. Therefore, the Duan family sent 3 people to the Carousel Hall. One of them was the shopkeeper, and the other 2 were Duan Xueqing, who was purely a spectator, and Pai Dinwan, who was half bodyguard and half cameraman. Duan Xueqing did not sense any conspiracy. At this moment, her mind was not as calm as her expression. Poplar Fruit had mentioned it before, and Duan Xueqing knew that Poplar Fruit would be participating in Givenchy's Bali Fashion Week this year. She just didn't know if she would see Poplar Fruit at the opening show. Perhaps it was a woman's magical sixth sense, but Duan Xueqing felt that Poplar Fruit should also be here. Originally, she thought that she could accept everything and calm down, but now, like the spring water after the glacier melted, it surged and gradually converged into a surging river. She looked forward and did not notice that Pai Dinwan was also looking at her with a complicated expression behind his glasses. Duan Xueqing thought that Pai Dinwan was dressed in his usual photo-taking attire. In fact, that was not the case. Today, Pai Dinwan came over with a lot of courage and the risk of being discovered. Pai Dinwan had previously scammed more than 20 newspaper companies and made a lot of money from them. Presumably, those reporters who had been scammed by him held a grudge against him. More than 20 newspaper companies. Even if one used their toes to think, they would know how large the number was. Among the reporters present and surrounding the Carousel Hall, there were definitely many from these 20 newspaper companies. Pai Dinwan did not know if there would be a few reporters who had met him when he made the deal. He knew that if they met, with the amount of hatred he had at that time, the other party would definitely discover him easily. Then, the outcome would be unimaginable. But there was no other way. He had to come. Putting aside the fact that he still had that damned mission to complete today, he also didn't want Duan Xueqing to go to Carousel Hall alone. Her old lover was there. Besides, wasn't his identity a cameraman specially hired by the Duan family? If he did not do anything and hid in the hotel all day, he would be exposed sooner or later. Fortunately, when he went out today, Pai Dinwan changed his attire. He wore a low-profile cap and held a large camera that could cover his face. It would probably be difficult to recognize him. Also, at this time, the attention of the reporters was on the stage and the middle seats where many celebrities were gathered. He was still considered safe. However, when he saw Duan Xueqing's calm face and fluctuating eyes, Pai Dinwan felt that he really should not have brought her here. He should not have brought her to Bali. His heart hurt a little. Really. Pai Dinwan felt that he had fallen deeper and deeper. Originally, he had only promised a friend to cooperate with the power behind him to put on a show. However, this show was surprisingly long. Furthermore, when he was drinking tea with Duan Xueqing, he accidentally fell in love with this girl who had always been very quiet. Why did he fall in love with her? Pai Dinwan was very puzzled. In the past 8 years of his bachelor life, he had not experienced the feeling of being moved for a long time. Then, this time, he fell in love with Duan Xueqing, who was 10 years younger than him. However, he had never thought that his ideal type was an iceberg like Duan Xueqing. He still remembered his inexperienced first love and heart-wrenching second love. They were both cheerful girls who loved to laugh and play. Among them, his second love, who he loved to death and broke up with in the end, was a backpacker who often played in the mountains and overseas. It could be said that no matter where Duan Xueqing looked, she was different from the girls he had liked. Well, except for her beauty. However, he fell in love with Duan Xueqing not because of her beauty, right? Pai Dinwan felt that when he sat quietly in the tea room and drank tea with Duan Xueqing, it made him think of eternity. It was really comfortable. Although they did not talk, they did not have the impetuousness of the secular world. It made him feel that his heart and soul were healed and rested. However, falling in love with a person he should not love, falling in love with the target of his mission, and falling in love with a woman who he might not be worthy of in his life, was a mistake. Pai Dinwan was deeply aware of this point. Agreeing to come to Bali in advance was also an escape. However, he did not expect that his escape would not succeed. He saw Duan Xueqing looking forward to Poplar Fruit's appearance. Pai Dinwan was jealous and very uncomfortable in his heart. In addition to Duan Xueqing, there was actually another woman in the seating area waiting for Poplar Fruit's appearance. Princess Charlotte. Today, she was wearing a green off-shoulder dress and a white sun hat with a long brim. She was also very fashionable. Although Gucci also had its own show in Bali Fashion Week, it was an Italian brand after all. It did not have a place on the main stage of the opening ceremony. Therefore, Princess Charlotte had the time to leave the brand she endorsed to attend Givenchy's main show. While chatting with her acquaintances around her, she looked at the Givenchy show with her beautiful eyes and said in her heart, "It seems that guy is going to appear, right? The newspaper said that he is a genius. I'm really curious to see how he has grown in the past half a month." Chapter 756. Ladies and gentlemen. The host wasn't present, but his voice was broadcasted throughout the hall. Originally, there was still some buzz in the hall because the VIPs were taking the time to greet people they knew and didn't know. When they heard the host's call, they knew that Givenchy's main stage was about to begin. No one dared or was willing to disturb the order of such a high-class event. They quickly took their seats, and the hall quieted down. "I am honored to introduce Givenchy to all of you." Givenchy. The opening usually had a background introduction. Although everyone present was a veteran in the fashion industry, the introduction was just icing on the cake. However, when it came to Givenchy's past glory, under the influence of a few supporters, many smiled and clapped their hands. "Now, let Givenchy's new stage lead us into a brand new world of art." The host really dared to brag. Even Chanel didn't dare to say it was a world of art. Regardless of the audience's reaction, the rhythmic music began, and Givenchy's main stage began. The first to appear was naturally the Birds of Paradise collection launched by the chief designer, Riccardo. The first two models appeared side by side, causing the audience to gasp in surprise. It was impossible for an artist to completely change his style. It was as absurd as asking Old Man Whitestone to paint a dark sunflower, or asking Van Gogh to paint fish, prawns, insects, and crabs. Although Riccardo didn't completely change his style, it was far from his previous style. One had to know that Riccardo's previous designs were very gothic, especially last year's Dog Head series, which brought out the dark aesthetic to the fullest. This year's Birds of Paradise collection didn't have a trace of black. The pure white and the vibrant green ran through the design concept. Coupled with the bright and flamboyant Birds of Paradise flowers, Riccardo once again changed people's perception of him. Before they had time to savor it, Riccardo's first two sets of clothes and the models walked off the stage. Poplar Fruit walked past them on a world-class runway for the first time. That's right. Poplar Fruit was the third to appear. The main thing was that they couldn't display all of the clothes in the beginning. According to the design process, they had to display all of Givenchy's collections at the beginning and make a promotional appearance. Next, Givenchy would arrange the clothes according to the type of clothing, such as long skirts, short skirts, casual wear, business suits, half-length suits, accessories, and so on. Then, he would let the different series of clothes take turns on the stage. On one hand, it would reduce the aesthetic fatigue of the audience, and on the other, it would give Poplar Fruit enough time to change. With a nimble rhythm, Poplar Fruit walked onto the stage wearing the second main outfit of Ardell's Splash Ink collection. She saw that he was wearing casual trousers with layers of ink, and a high-collared long shirt with the same pattern of ink bamboo-like patterns. The buttons were double-breasted, making him look even more ancient. His clothes gave off a celestial aura, and he looked like an elegant celestial. With a height of 1.88 meters and a perfect figure that was close to the golden ratio, Yanghua had already attracted a lot of attention just by looking at her physique. The bright lights shone on his face, which had been made up by Matisse, and the handsome lines, high nose, and eyes that were as lively as the stars. It made people suddenly feel that Poplar Fruit, with a long sword, was a prince from ancient times. Even Princess Charlotte couldn't help but praise him in her heart. What a handsome man. Of course, different people had different impressions of the prince they were talking about. But many people felt that this prince was a Western prince. Although Poplar Fruit had a head of black hair, under Victor's meticulous ironing, it was fine and slightly curly, giving people an inexplicable sense of Chinese and Western handsomeness. Of course, except for a few people, more people paid attention to the model's performance and how well he fit the clothes. Of course, there was no problem with the matching. Just as Ardil had boasted in front of the reporters before, Leon is the most suitable model in the world for this series of clothes that I have designed. Poplar Fruit didn't need to simulate anything. His own temperament was a perfect match for the clothes. As for the model's performance, Poplar Fruit's appearance was almost stunning. His impeccable walking posture completely broke people's previous impression of him as a rookie model. Look at the steps he took, it seemed that every step was just right for the rhythm, directly penetrating people's hearts. Different from other models' firm and powerful steps, Poplar Fruit's steps seemed to have changed for the clothes. Although they looked as firm as before, they were faintly more agile. Yes, the feeling of agility was like the bamboo leaves in the bamboo forest swaying in the wind. With this agility, the whole set seemed to have been sublimated. Unbelievable. Many buyers were amazed. Their professional vision allowed them to immediately discover the extraordinariness of this set of clothes. Compared to the buyers in Europe and America, the buyers in East Asia were more excited. They not only wrote down their own comments in their notebooks, but also secretly identified this set of clothes as one of the clothes that must be introduced after the fashion week. If we hang this model's photos in the store, it will definitely sell well. The master of the Duan family's shop was particularly excited. He had already begun to plan for the following negotiations. There were 3 people from the Duan family, and he was the only one who was serious. Duan Xueqing's mood was a bit strange. The moment Poplar Fruit appeared, although her face was still cold, her eyes were as bright as the sun rising from the sea. At this moment, Poplar Fruit was not as low-key and dull as before. He was like an ancient inkstone covered with dust, shining under the spotlight. But for some reason, Duan Xueqing's eyes dimmed a lot. Perhaps because of this brilliance, she suddenly felt a little strange. Was it because she had been away from him for too long? Pai Dinwan noticed Duan Xueqing's mood swings. His heart was full of feelings, and his brows gradually knitted into a knot. Ex-boyfriend? Pai Dinwan suddenly asked Duan Xueqing in her ear. Duan Xueqing's body stiffened. After a while, she slowly relaxed. Her cold and charming side profile was facing Pai Dinwan. She didn't look at him, but slightly shook her head. Senior? The 2 short words were still so concise and neat. Duan Xueqing pursed her lips and didn't seem to speak. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.